Chapter 14:13. How was this possible? It was truly a bit too outrageous. They had connected the heavenly road just like that? Chu Feng was stupefied at first, and then he found it hard to believe. This was truly absurd. The area connected to this road is suspected to be recorded in the ancient books. Number 2579? A doubtful spiritual wave transmitted over. It seemed to be very surprised and puzzled. There was actually a number. Chu Feng was even more moved after hearing this. Could it be that a certain road had really been connected? But was the heavens so easy to penetrate? He was fairly shocked. It had never been heard of since ancient times. It was said that it was difficult for even one person to be born out of millions and millions of evolvers. It was difficult to encounter such a world-shaking miracle since ancient times. He reckoned that only the creature number 9 said could sever the ages with one sword at the first mountain in the Yang realm calmly enter. Or could it be that the white-clothed woman could also pass through what he saw before his eyes? Yes, Chu Feng immediately realized that if there was a passage here, it was also left behind from the great battle back then. The presence of the white-clothed woman and the broken emperor's bell here indicated that everything was possible. The aura below is truly unbearable. It's not a good place, but a vicious land. Hurry up and close it. It's really strange. Why did it connect today? A simple discussion came from above. The two creatures seemed to be watchmen with doubt and puzzlement. Chu Feng raised his head and looked up. The dark and deep sky was very indistinct with many cracks. Moreover, there were some areas where beams of light passed through and illuminated the sky. Faintly, there were two enormous faces faintly discernible there. They didn't seem to be human and were extremely large. They were observing the passage suspiciously from above. They were somewhat hesitant. They wanted to try opening up the road to investigate, but they were also very apprehensive. Hurry up and call for people to repair this place. Block this place and don't let anything go wrong, said one of the creatures. No need. Look, it's healing itself and is about to block this road. However, it's really too terrifying. Just what kind of power can connect to the heavens? How can ordinary creatures do it? The other creature said with a trembling voice. He felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. Evidently, they were too resplendent there and didn't carefully explore the relatively gloomy space below. They still hadn't seen Chu Feng. Moreover, they seemed to be extremely unwilling to stretch out their divine senses to investigate. They were somewhat fearful of this road. What happened? Could it be that something novel has appeared? Let's have a look. A few more spiritual fluctuations were transmitted over, as if several extraordinary creatures were rapidly approaching. Then, they arrived at the exit of the tunnel. The two non-human creatures with blurry faces earlier were indeed the guards. They greeted the few people who had just arrived and quickly reported the situation here. How strange, there's actually an ancient road that's opened. Number 2579 seems to be quite ancient. I reckon it has some background. Judging from the voice, it should be a young man. Sure enough, soon afterwards, golden holy light erupted. A face appeared in the gradually closing and indistinct passageway, illuminating his indistinct silhouette. He was like a sun god, golden immortal flames burning, blazing and powerful. This young man had quite the status. The two protectors were extremely respectful and cautious, explaining something to him in detail. Well, it seems that our trip to Area 51 this time is really worth it. We might see something extraordinary. An ancient road runs through the strange land. Should we go down and have a look? The young man whose face was glowing with golden holy light said, as if he was asking for the opinions of his companions. The two protectors were instantly shocked and extremely anxious. They immediately dissuaded him, telling him that the unknown land 2579 was extremely terrifying. Otherwise, its road wouldn't have been guarded by Area 51. At this time, the voice of a young woman came over. It's said that Area 51 is the most mysterious in high heavens. There are all kinds of terrifying and strange things, some of which have become eternal mysteries and are difficult to crack. At the same time, there are some secret paths that lead to foreign lands. It seems that we're lucky to have caught up today. We're really going to see a dangerous land. I'm also interested in that place 2579. Her voice was very crisp, like the collision of pearls and jade. It was very rhythmic and pleasant to the ear. Through her spiritual fluctuations, one could know what she was saying. These young people's identities were not ordinary. They came to visit the mysterious Area 51 and unexpectedly encountered such a thing. Now that they knew about the ancient land 2579, they wanted to explore it. Several young creatures came forward to study the road that had just opened and was slowly closing. Vaguely, a few gorgeous faces were revealed. Chu Feng stared at the sky. There was no doubt that these creatures had extremely special bloodlines. If they were in the Yang realm, they would be very astonishing. Their whole bodies were actually blooming with dazzling multicolored light. Some of them were boiling with golden flames, about to ignite the heaven and earth. Some of them were surging with purple qi, as if purple qi was coming from the east. There were also some that shot out red light, about to penetrate the void, setting off the sacred place like a celestial kingdom. Mysterious energy vibrated, and the sky rumbled incessantly. Chu Feng was amazed. Was that high heavens? He could actually see the creatures up there. Some were humanoid and some were like demonic birds. Their auras were overbearing. Some were holy and flawless, and some were terrifying. A woman pushed open a corner of the passage and looked down. As a result, the two protectors turned pale with fright. They hurriedly reached out to pull it, but they were shouted back. They were apprehensive about the background of these extraordinary young people, so they didn't dare to stop them. The few of them kept persuading and insisted on doing so. The protectors had no choice but to report it. This aura is too unpleasant. It's dull and devoid of spirituality. It's quite filthy down there. It would be disgusting if there were any living beings in that foreign land. A young silver-haired woman spoke. She covered her mouth and nose with a look of disgust. Her beautiful and exquisite face was full of dissatisfaction. She was very disappointed with this result. I thought there would be an unexpected surprise after coming to Area 51. I was going to witness some kind of miracle. Now it seems that this 2579 ancient land is not surprising at all. Yes, I also thought we would find a rare secret land with emperor-level materials and treasures. However, it's impossible after thinking about it. How can such a shocking encounter be so easy to come by? The silver-haired woman's beautiful face was full of disgust as she covered her mouth and nose. The young man covered in golden immortal flames like a sun god was also very dissatisfied. He said, "The aura down there is really unbearable. The pollution is too serious. It's even worse than a wasteland." Below, Chu Feng was speechless. The Yang realm was actually being evaluated like this? It was too unbearable. How much disgust did the people above have? They were too arrogant. Soon, spiritual sound waves came from afar. The men and women with extraordinary identities were transmitted, telling them to leave quickly. 2579 was in extreme danger. It was one of the two watchers. He looked up the information about 2579 that could be seen after it was broken down and sealed. He was extremely shocked. "Don't get close. Leave quickly. I just found a bloody red cross in the database. There's a disaster. There used to be a great figure who fell there. It's a passively open land. It was the creatures below that broke through the heavens. Back then, we didn't take the initiative to open the road. During that battle, the ancestral Tao material boiled. That road can't be shaken. Leave quickly." The Watcher's spiritual fluctuations were very urgent. He told them that it was extremely dangerous and told them to leave quickly. After hearing the warning, the young people were shocked at first. Then, they were pleasantly surprised and eager to give it a try. "Oh, such a strange place. We want to see it. So many years have passed. Even the ancestral Tao material has long cooled down. It's nothing. They insisted on moving and even wanted to go down to investigate. No, leave quickly. The watcher's face was covered in cold sweat as he anxiously stopped them. A young man said, "Don't panic. If something really happens, we'll take responsibility ourselves. It's rare to encounter such a wonderful thing in Area 51. Then, the young man covered in golden immortal flames poked his head out through a gap in the corner and looked down. In an instant, he cried out. He was really shocked. That was because he saw a black arm outside the exit. It was boundlessly huge and stretched towards the unknown ominous soil below. What is this? He was shocked. He felt as if his body was about to collapse. It was hard to imagine what kind of creature left this behind. The other young men and women also poked their heads out and scanned with their spiritual energy. Immediately, their scalps went numb. Was this the arm of an emperor? Heavens, this looks like the broken arm of an ancestral Tao. Why is it broken here? A woman said with a trembling voice. Don't panic. Don't release powerful energy to stimulate it. If our auras don't get close to it, it won't take the initiative to attack us. It's too majestic. Even if there's residual energy, it will ignore us. We're not on the same level. They calmed their minds. Their energy and spiritual energy no longer approached the black arm. Then, they carefully observed below and saw the broken bell and the Emperor's blood. As for the white-clothed Empress, the immortal mist was surging. She had been submerged and could no longer be probed. Naturally, they saw Chu Feng, and they quickly locked onto him. There's a living creature. Could it be that he unintentionally opened this ancient path? Someone said. No, the intensity of his energy isn't too high. His realm is even lower than ours. The young man covered in golden flames said. He actually made the judgment immediately. These creatures were all extraordinary. Even though they were far away, they could accurately and correctly judge Chu Feng's evolution level. This kind of ability was very rare. In the crack in the sky dome above, a silver-haired woman with a rather good appearance appeared. Her voice was clear and pleasant to the ears. She stared at Chu Feng and asked, "Who are you? What is the region below? What kind of background do you have?" Chu Feng felt uneasy inside. It really was too unexpected. He actually encountered a creature from high heavens here. From the information he learned from Number 9, he became vigilant. He felt like he encountered great danger. The creatures of high heavens might not be of the good kind, foretelling death and danger. I am only passing by. You all can continue. He calmly spoke. Then, he began to withdraw, not wishing to have any interactions with high heavens right now. He wasn't the owner of the damaged bell, nor was he the white-clothed Empress. He didn't have the ability to pierce through high heavens. The people above all revealed strange expressions. None of them were ordinary people. Their eyes were sharp, able to clearly see Chu Feng's expression. From his retreat they could see his restraining fear. This made them inwardly relaxed. Previously, they really were scared of encountering a mysterious, otherworldly expert. First, answer a few of our questions. Why are you here? Who opened up this path? What kind of place is 2579 exactly? The young man covered in golden divine light asked coldly. He released a powerful aura to intimidate Chu Feng, forcing him to speak the truth. I'm just passing by. I don't know anything. Chu Feng spoke, and then he quickly withdrew. The people above were baffled, not understanding what he meant. This region was too strange. There was a domain released by a great universe-level flower bud, as well as a damaged bell and emperor blood. A strange aura flowed about like a swamp, strand after strand, as if heaven and earth had been frozen. That was why Chu Feng's retreat was extremely slow. Capture him. I really can't take it anymore. The aura below is too filthy. Just smelling this type of smell makes me want to vomit. It truly is a filthy region. That young silver-haired woman actually spoke like this. Even though she was extremely beautiful, her face fair and sparkling, her charm moving, these types of words of discrimination were extremely ear-piercing, even if her voice was good. She had already figured out the ins and outs. The creatures below weren't powerful, and they were rather apprehensive, currently shrinking back. That was why she had long since calmed down and had the confidence to act in such a domineering manner. The young man covered in resplendent golden radiance nodded and said, "This type of smell is indeed a bit disgusting. I don't want to be contaminated too much either. This is a wasteland that makes one want to vomit." Below, Chu Feng was furious. If not for his apprehension towards the heavens, he would have long taken the initiative to attack and kill those people. "Little friend, what happened?" The Flame Essence Race's elders in the Supreme Restricted Region couldn't remain calm anymore, their voices trembling. It was because even though they were outside, they could still vaguely hear the voices from the heavens and a portion of the conversation. Of course, it was through the perception of spiritual fluctuations. "You, get up here!" The creatures of the heavens who now had confidence took action. It was precisely the young man wrapped in dazzling golden radiance. He used a divine ability and a large hand reached down. At this moment, Chu Feng no longer retreated. He put on one armor after another that he had previously taken off to bombard himself and suppress the strange changes in his body. Suddenly, his entire body shone dazzlingly. "Not simple. Those battle suits aren't ordinary goods. Let me do it as well." In the sky, the silver-haired woman spoke. She quickly stretched out a jade-like hand, and even though she moved later, she reached out to grab Chu Feng first. "These filthy creatures are a bit disgusting, but for the sake of understanding what's below, I'll reluctantly take action," the silver-haired woman muttered to herself. "Don't. We creatures of the heavens will feel uncomfortable after entering the 2579 ancient land. Our bodies and spirits will decline a bit. That world rejects us," a guard of Area 51 loudly reminded. What? Could it be that the strange land below was once an extraordinary great world? There are actually rules that reject outside creatures? Not simple. But it doesn't matter. Our realms are higher than his, so it shouldn't be a problem for us to deal with the creatures of that filthy place for a short period of time. "I'll catch him immediately," the silver-haired woman said. "I'm coming." The young man blossoming with golden splendor also shouted. He had long since taken action. Chu Feng's eyes were faint. He had long since put on the heaven-bestowed armor and other things. He was quite disgusted with these two, but he first set his eyes on the silver-haired woman's large hand. He was going to use her to test his blade first. "It's you," he said in a low voice. His right hand held the shiny diamond chakram, ready to smash out at any time. Because the distance was quite far, he had enough time to prepare these things. "Today, I'll fight against the heavens," Chu Feng said coldly. "Laughable. This disgusting place, filthy world, and disgusting creatures. Get up here." As expected, the silver-haired woman arrived a step earlier than the man covered in golden light. She stretched out her large hand and grabbed towards Chu Feng. "Duo!" Chu Feng released a light shout. He then used all of his strength to activate his astonishing cultivation. The diamond chakram, which was forged from several types of mother gold, seemed to be burning. Dazzling beams of light shot into the heavens. Bang! Chu Feng directly smashed out. Accompanied by a rain of blood and a miserable shriek, even though that woman was quite powerful, she still suffered greatly when facing a strike from Chu Feng that contained all of his power. Her entire silver hand was smashed into pieces and blood splashed through the air. "Ah!" A mournful cry sounded. "Little friend, what are you doing?" The Flame Essence Race's people were no longer calm. They were simply alarmed as they asked Chu Feng with trembling voices. "Nothing much, just give me some salt." Chu Feng had an indifferent expression as he spoke indifferently. Then, with a chi-la sound, flames wrapped around the severed hand and began to burn it. "Give me some seasoning," Chu Feng shouted. Chapter 14:14. Within the Zenith-restricted land, the Flame Essence Race's experts were stupefied. Was this real? What did they see? That youth was about to go crazy. He was actually roasting the creatures of the heavens. This simply toppled everything they knew. They were a bit petrified, their bodies going rigid. That was the heavens, yet it appeared just like that today. Even now, they still didn't know how the path was opened, making their minds tremble. Yet now, that youth actually challenged the creatures of the heavens, threatening to roast them and eat them. This truly left them speechless. Even those with thick nerves couldn't take it. From past until now, how many times had the path of the heavens been opened? Whenever it appeared, it would be as if the heavens collapsed and the earth caved in. Who wouldn't feel fear? Who wouldn't feel fear? However, now everything changed. There was someone who wanted to eat the creatures of the heavens. It really was too ridiculous. Little friend, you have to reconsider. Don't act randomly. The Flame Essence Race's experts were trembling, greatly alarmed, feeling like even breathing was difficult. This human youth, who they viewed as someone who could bring them opportunities and natural luck, was too terrifying, leaving them horrified. They felt like he was actually a star of calamity, someone who would provoke a great disaster. In the space behind the moon-shaped stone gate, miserable cries continued. That exquisite silver-haired woman's miserable cries rang through this place, her blood scattering through the skies. She simply couldn't believe it, even more so finding it hard to accept. The foreign native she viewed as disgusting actually seriously injured her so easily. One of her hands broke apart, falling onto the ground, divine blood flowing in a long stream. Intense pain. This made her slender body contort. Of course, what she couldn't tolerate the most was the sullenness and anger she felt. She previously felt contempt, loathing the world below, looking down on the creatures there, yet in the end, her hand was smashed apart so quickly. How could the elite disciples of a glorious, powerful race of the heavens be so unbearable? Not only did she loathe the creature below, she also hated herself for not being careful enough, actually suffering this type of treatment. She felt like this was an extraordinary humiliation. "I am going to kill your entire clan." The silver-haired woman felt incomparable hatred, screaming at the end of the passage. Her originally beautiful and brilliant white face was now a bit distorted, looking a bit sinister, full of killing intent. "What are you randomly screaming for? What are you screaming for? It's so unpleasant." Chu Feng stood on the mysterious land, looking into the heavens, extremely calm, directly berating that woman. Because he had confidence. So what if they were beings of the higher heavens? That big black hand was an example. It was broken by someone here. And now, the white-clothed empress wasn't far away. Her eyelids were trembling, and she was about to wake up. If there really was a heavenly giant that wasn't easy to deal with, she believed that the white-clothed woman would be able to teach them a lesson. Of course, this was Chu Feng's self-consolation. What else could he do? In any case, he had already tried to kill them. He had already provoked those creatures. Could it be that he was going to admit defeat now? Was he going to retreat and say something nice? Impossible. That was definitely not in line with his personality. Since that was the case, he would go all the way and ruthlessly teach these creatures a lesson. Scarlet flames leaped about, containing dense energy. They wrapped around the falling silver wing, making it quite dazzling. Not long after, waves of fragrance spread out. Chu Feng was a man of his word. He was seriously and solemnly barbecuing the wing. The energy flames were strong enough to cook the flesh of powerful beings from the high heavens. Chu Feng was now King Heng, and his cultivation was extremely powerful. Even if he was dealing with an unknown species, it wouldn't be a problem for him to cook the terrifying bloodline of the higher heavens. King-level blood energy erupted. Beams of light overflowed, thunder rumbled, and lightning curled around him. They were extremely dazzling, and the energy was exceptionally astonishing. He used lightning and fire to imprison the silver wing, and the feathers were quickly burned clean. Then, he tore off a layer of skin and extinguished the fire. He used a secret technique to extract clear water from space and wash the meat. Cleaning, applying seasoning, and then barbecuing, his movements were done in one go. He was skilled and experienced, and all of this was completed in a series of extremely coherent movements. At the exit of the higher heavens passage, the young creatures with astonishing origins were all dumbfounded. Even the silver-haired woman herself was no longer screaming or angrily rebuking. Instead, she was like a clay sculpture, completely dumbfounded. What am I seeing? The flesh of the primitive white sparrow race has been roasted and reduced to food? Is this real? Why do I feel like it's so unreal? Am I seeing things? One of the young men said softly. He looked as if he had seen a living ghost, not daring to believe his own eyes. What was the primitive white sparrow race? This was a terrifying race that stood side by side with the innate races. It was rumored that they might coexist with heaven and earth, their bloodline high above, exceeding many well-known powerful races. This wasn't a normal clan. The innate race had the power to open the heavens, making many inheritances of the higher heavens feel reverence, not daring to approach their place of residence. In the end, the young disciples of the white sparrow race, who were similarly famous, actually encountered this type of experience. How many people would believe this if they told others about it? This was especially the case when the foreign race named 2579 was extremely unbearable just now. They looked down on him, saying that just a breath of the air below made them feel disgusted, that they wanted to vomit. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, the silver-haired woman among them would suffer such a great loss? At the exit of the passage, the silver-haired woman was simply about to explode. Her towering chest rose and fell intensely, her breathing hurried. Her head of glossy silver hair fluttered about even though there was no wind. Her voice was ice-cold as she said, "This type of attitude of yours is purely ignorant and arrogant, disgusting and hateful. You have already successfully angered me. I have now changed my mind. I will not wipe out your clan, but rather the 9 clans related to it." She couldn't bear it any longer. Her severed hand turned into a silver wing, and then it was smeared with honey and roasted, becoming food. The people at her side were all shocked and speechless. The young evolver below was truly courting death, actually daring to act against the white sparrow race like this, believing that no one could save him. The flame essence race's experts were all like statues, not moving for a long time. They truly couldn't evaluate this result. They actually provoked this type of disaster. At the same time, they also felt that it was rather strange. Did this human youth often do this type of thing? He actually even brought honey and sauce, his movements swift and practiced. This was simply a repeat offender. He definitely did this type of thing many times. So fragrant. Chu Feng took a sniff, feeling quite satisfied with his own skills. In front of him was a piece of wing with sparkling and translucent meat. Its fragrance wafted through the air. It had long been roasted until it was golden and glossy, making one's mouth water. No matter how one looked at it, this was a rare delicacy. In particular, this was an ingredient that originated from the heavens, making it even more precious. Not to mention the bystanders, even the several old powerhouses of the flame essence race couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Ever since they had turned into flesh and blood beings, they also had this kind of appetite. This filthy world, filthy air, just smelling it makes me want to vomit. You disgusting creature, you really deserve to die. How dare you blaspheme me like this? The silver-haired woman screamed. Her beautiful and fair oval face was filled with anger. Her face was distorted, and she wanted nothing more than to rush down to the lower realms and skin this person alive. Scram! Shout to the side. Chu Feng didn't spoil her at all. Even though he had the upper hand, he still severely reprimanded her, making her sober up. At the entrance to the heavens, the group of people had long been dumbfounded, not knowing what to say. They wanted to comfort the silver-haired woman, but they were afraid of provoking her. Perhaps only by helping her kill the youth below would they be able to free her from the anger in her chest. At this time, Chu Feng opened his mouth. He turned towards the Forbidden Land and said, "Seniors, do you have dogs here? An evolved one from the Flame Essence race is also fine. What do you want to do?" The several powerhouses of the Flame Essence race felt a bit of a headache. They had never thought that they would provoke such a strange oddball who was actually a scourge. "It's useful, lend me one," Chu Feng said. Seeing them hesitate, he immediately said, "I've risked my life for you, and now you can't even satisfy this little request of mine? Don't worry, I'm just trying to save myself. If you don't prepare one for me, I'll immediately poke a hole in the heavens and kill my way over. I'll destroy them indiscriminately. At that time, if any problems arise, you'll have to deal with them yourselves." Was this a scourge threat? The veins on the foreheads of the Flame Essence race's elders twitched. They were really afraid that this young human king would continue to court death and completely implicate them. After a moment of hesitation, they summoned a large vicious dog from the mountain. Its entire body was covered in flames, but it had already transformed into a body of flesh and blood. It howled there with a muffled voice like thunder. It was like a small mountain with snow-white claws and fangs that flickered with cold light. Its body was covered in scarlet fur that was over a foot long. It looked extremely ferocious and carried with it a boundless hostility. Chu Feng held a shiny knife and fork as he stared at the golden roasted wings. He looked as if he was about to start eating and eat to his heart's content. In the heavens, the silver-haired woman couldn't bear it any longer. At the same time, she was incomparably anxious. She was really afraid that Chu Feng would start eating immediately. If that happened, she would become the disgrace of the White Sparrow race. Just thinking about it made her shiver all over. That was an unacceptable and terrifying result. She threatened loudly, "I'm warning you, if you back off, everything will be fine. If you dare to eat my flesh and blood, you will regret being born into this world. Your entire clan will be exterminated and your body and soul will turn to ashes. There will be no next life and your name will forever be erased from this world." Chu Feng looked disdainfully at the heavens. He was extremely disgusted with this woman. She had always described this world as filthy. Her high and mighty attitude disgusted the races of the world below. How could Chu Feng have a good impression of her? Therefore, he made a move and directly threw the roasted wing to the big red dog that was as mighty as a small hill. He said, "Catch it, it's for you to eat." The big dog with a monstrous aura stood in front of the moon gate. It instinctively opened its bloody mouth and directly swallowed the fragrant roasted wing. Crunch! Crunch! Even the bones were chewed. Its mouth was full of saliva, and the golden meat was churning. The ferocious glint in its eyes actually weakened. It narrowed its eyes, looking as if it was enjoying itself. Motherf ****. The powerhouses of the Flame Spirit race suddenly felt their vision darken. Although they had their suspicions before, they never thought he would actually do such a thing. He was simply too audacious and wanted to kill them. It was already too late to stop him. Prince Heng's throw was far too fast and accurate. Chu Feng only spoke after he had completed his action. "This scourge." An old man lamented bitterly. He wanted nothing more than to beat him to death. As for above, at the entrance of the passage, the silver-haired woman's vision darkened and she almost fell down. This kind of humiliation was too intense and far more excessive than she had imagined. It wasn't that human youth who ate her wings, but a large dog. This was simply contempt to the extreme, trampling on her dignity and whipping her soul and personality. "You!" The silver-haired woman coughed up blood. She was so angry that she was about to go crazy. Chu Feng was calm and unhurried as he said, Those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others. You've humiliated our world, detested all living beings, looked down on us, and belittled us. What reason do I have to respect you then? Use secret treasures together and quickly kill him. Seal off the news. Today, no one is allowed to speak of what happened here. The young man shrouded in resplendent golden light spoke. He called on the other young men and women to eliminate the human youth below and vent the anger of the silver-haired woman. Previously, they were all a bit apprehensive. After all, the silver-haired woman was very strong, but in the end, her palm was shattered in a single exchange. They didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. But now, this existence actually dared to do such a provocative thing. Not only did he humiliate the White Sparrow race, as their comrades, he even humiliated their dignity and violated their bottom line. Now they had to decisively use their most powerful methods to quickly end everything. Chi. Blinding divine light spread out. There was a chain that rushed down. This was an extremely powerful secret treasure. It covered over towards Chu Feng, wanting to lock him in place. I have the immortal heart to strengthen my body and spirit, and I can even cleanse the heavenly river. What can you all do to me? Chu Feng lightly shouted. His entire body shone as a mountain and river diagram appeared. This was precisely the treasure the flame essence race gave him for self-defense. It was of an extremely high level, and now, he was using it to deal with the heavens. Immediately, Tao sounds rumbled and domain runes rushed into the heavens. A magnificent stretch of mountains and rivers appeared, accompanied by starlight and winding around the sun, moon, and heavenly river. The divine diagram covered the sky and faced the powerful chain head-on, stopping it in midair. The faces of the flame essence race twitched. They felt a wave of pain in their teeth, liver, and heart. They didn't give you the mountain and river diagram to provoke the heavens, but to use it to obtain a treasure. In the end you tormented me like this. It was too late to say anything now. They could only watch helplessly. Purring! The sound of rupturing rang out in the sky. A thick streak of sword chi was like a starry river hanging upside down. It ferociously rushed down, wanting to kill Chu Feng. Chu Feng didn't panic and chanted, I am the great treasure emperor ancestor. I have been reborn after 9 deaths, and even a strand of hair on my body is an innate object. Just a few broken weapons dare to compete in front of me. Go, suppress them. He pretended to pull out his hair, and with a shake of his hand, he threw out a precious pestle refined from the abnormal magnetic marrow. It swept across the sky to meet the thick sword chi. With a dong sound, the terrifying sword chi was scattered, and the ancient sword that connected the heavens was smashed back. The flame essence race's elders' mouths were about to become crooked and twitched slightly. They really wanted to curse at the great treasure emperor ancestor. That was their precious pestle. Kill! Kill! Shouts rang out in the sky one after another. Those people were furious, and they all went all out. They attacked with great killing intent, wanting to crush him to pieces. Come, leave the heavenly armor and attack through the sky. Chu Feng spoke calmly. His entire body shone, producing divine objects again, moreover not just a single one. They clashed with all types of treasures in the sky. Either way, they weren't his weapons. They all came from the flame essence race, and were extremely powerful. Moreover, they contained incomparable energy from the flame essence race's elders. Even if this one takes a nap, tens of thousands of years will pass and great eras will collapse. Now that 9 deaths have been reborn, who can contend against me? Just a group of bugs from the high heavens, yet you dare to buzz wung wung before me? All of you should just get lost and reincarnate. Chu Feng spoke shamelessly. He produced the treasures of others and blocked all types of weapons from the high heavens. He had the attitude of someone who looked down on the world. Isn't this fella's cultivation realm that astonishing? How could he have so many treasures? The youngsters in the sky were truly shocked. At the same time, they were resentful. This human youth was too unbridled, his words frivolous, provoking and ridiculing them again and again. This is Region 51. Use this place's great killing weapon and get rid of him. The young man with a head of golden hair spoke and suggested. In reality, the two overseers couldn't continue watching either. One of them was in charge of making a report, while the other was mobilizing Region 51's great killing weapon. Following a wave of trembling, the sky dome was covered in thick black energy. It was terrifying beyond compare. Chu Feng immediately released a strange cry. He felt that the situation was far from reassuring. He immediately summoned back the heavenly armor and put it on his body. In addition, he used the stone jar and diamond band to protect himself. What am I scared of? The white-clothed Empress is here. You all have great killing weapons, but so do I. When he thought of this, he didn't advance and instead retreated. He used the stone jar to protect his body as he approached the ruined bell dyed in emperor blood. He wanted to awaken it and attack the heavens. However, what left him helpless and horrified was that he couldn't approach it. It was extremely dangerous on that side. Bone-chilling energy swept over, and there were vague bell waves that rippled outwards. It was as if the world was going to be destroyed. He couldn't endure it. Chu Feng was a bit stupefied. He couldn't approach it. He was greatly alarmed. And what is that? Suddenly, he discovered that there was a piece of metal half buried in the earth. A bronze weapon? He directly summoned it, seizing it through the air. He actually obtained it easily without suffering any hindrance or interference. It seemed to have fallen off from something. There were mysterious patterns on it, and it was long like an irregular short rod. It was as long as a sword artifact. For some reason, Chu Feng felt that this thing might be formidable. As such, he grabbed it tightly without the slightest hesitation. In that instant, he became a bit absent-minded. He actually immediately understood what this thing was. It was because a hazy scene appeared before his eyes. It fell off a bronze coffin. Back then, an extremely bitter and terrifying great battle took place. That was an artifact known as the Three-World Coffin, and a piece like this broke off. Then, Chu Feng subconsciously brandished it, directly striking towards the heavens with the bronze artifact. It was accompanied by mysterious patterns and ripples. Then, with a hong sound, the endless black energy that descended from the heavens was blasted through. It was to the extent where he heard a kacha sound. A crack unexpectedly appeared on the so-called Great Killing Artifact at the end of the passage. What is that thing? The people above cried out in alarm, their faces pale. They simply didn't dare believe what they were seeing. They were incomparably shocked. Chu Feng's temperament was calm. He stood with his hands behind his back and said, "This is the ancestral weapon this one refined. This is the Three Lives Rod. It smashes your past lives, smashes your present lives, and smashes your future lives. No matter where you run, you won't be able to escape. From past to present, it is difficult for your ruined souls to remain. You are destined to be wiped out. If you want to live, why aren't you kowtowing to the leader for forgiveness? Otherwise, you will be completely wiped out." Chapter 14-15. The creatures of the heavens were truly shocked. What kind of bronze weapon was that? As the humanoid creature swung it around, it actually pierced through their weapons and destroyed them. The great weapon at the exit of the heavens was completely black and shaped like a sword. However, it was actually a 24-jointed metal whip with black lightning and chaotic energy. This was the secret weapon of Area 51, capable of suppressing all kinds of dangers and enemies. But now, cracks had appeared on it and it was almost broken. This was all caused by the attack from the creature below. After the cries of surprise, the place immediately became silent. Be it the silver-haired woman from the White Sparrow race or the young man shrouded in dazzling golden light, all of them turned pale as they stared at the scene below. Chu Feng himself was also astonished. Although he was brimming with confidence as he held the bronze weapon in one hand and looked disdainfully at the heavens with the other behind his back, he was still somewhat uncertain. Just what level of weapon was this? From the blurred imprinted picture, he saw the endless time that had fallen from the bronze coffin and was buried in the soil and sand. As a result, when he held it in his hand, he managed to shatter the black killing weapon that the heavens had mobilized so many people to suppress with a single blow. I have been reborn from 9 death. Even your ancestors have to kowtow and call me senior upon seeing my true form. Ignorant child, come and pay your respects. In any case, although Chu Feng had some doubts in his heart and wasn't very confident, he couldn't appear weak on the surface. He berated the group of young creatures from the heavens. He had walked down the dark path and was going to act all the way to the end even if he had to. As for what the creatures above thought, he simply didn't care about it. He only wanted to vent the anger in his heart and assume the attitude of a conceited expert. In the back, the expressions of the flame spirit race weren't good. They felt that they had provoked a great disaster today. How could they have a good ending after offending the heavens like this? At the same time, they were a bit unwilling, helpless, and regretful. Their race had once taken the risk to step into the special space within the Moon Gate, but at that time, they weren't able to approach those weapons. Especially that broken piece of bronze on the ground. How could it be so powerful? How could they know that the reason Chu Feng was able to approach and resist the might of the damaged bell and the Emperor's blood was related to the stone jar in addition to his mastery of domains? Otherwise, he would have most likely been killed by the great universe-level pollen. His flesh and blood would change completely, and no one knew what he would evolve into. After a short period of silence, a loud bark broke the silence. It was the fierce dog of the flame essence race that had been fed the primitive white sparrow wings. After swallowing the rich energy meat, its blood began to boil and it couldn't help but let out a low growl. This bestial roar immediately caused the sound of hurried breathing to be heard from the deathly silent exit of high heavens. Green veins appeared on the face of the primordial white sparrow woman. Her eyes were filled with resentment, and her face was distorted. She felt that this was the greatest humiliation of her life. She had implicated her family. How could the flesh and blood of a race that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful innate beings be fed to dogs? From ancient times until now, this was a humiliation that the white sparrow race had never experienced before. Who can help me kill him? She released a low roar, truly unable to endure it any longer. Her youthful and beautiful face was ashen and sinister, her entire body surging with killing intent, her head of hair flying about chaotically. She knew that she couldn't injure the person below by herself. Don't worry, don't take action. The person in charge of Area 51 will arrive soon. Let them deal with this. The young man surrounded in resplendent golden divine light said. He was a direct descendant of the Gold family, and in high heavens, they were revered as a Gold family power. One could well imagine just how terrifying their background was. This was a powerful family whose origins were unknown and whose destination was unknown. In their eyes, no matter how many great eras changed, they would never decline. Their golden radiance would envelop millions and millions of years, intimidating all great eras. One of the 2 overseers from before had already gone to make a report. Only, this place was normally too peaceful. Even though there were all types of secrets suppressed here, it was normally lifeless without any disturbances. As a result, the overseers here were a bit slack, and the person in charge took a long time to arrive. How could it be like this? Not too far away, a scarlet cloud appeared. Its aura was boundless, and it released a low voice. It quickly swooped over, carrying with it a powerful energy that could intimidate one's soul. Everyone back up! The one who arrived shouted. This was a middle-aged man whose entire body was scarlet red, and there were even some scarlet scales on his face. He was domineering and tyrannical, his blood-colored eyes full of unruliness. Area 51 was extremely large. He was only the person in charge of this region. Behind him, his assistant was also alarmed, waking up from seclusion and hurrying over. It's actually 2579, how could it be him? Hurry, bring up more detailed information. The expression of the person in charge of this region changed. The scarlet scales all over his body released sinister light, as if they were dripping with blood. His authority was much greater than that of an ordinary overseer. That was why the information he was allowed to look up was even more detailed. Almost as soon as he understood what was going on, his expression completely changed, and even his body began to tremble slightly. Who was the one who opened this? It's simply too reckless, too dangerous. He shouted. The scales on his face were all bright red to the point of dripping blood. The primitive white sparrow race woman didn't dare act arrogant when facing the person in charge of this region. She had long restrained her anger and told him what happened just now. The overseer on the side also explained, saying that this was a passage that opened on its own, and not someone from high heavens opened it up. There is a destructive level source of pollution below. Immediately seal this place up. The person in charge spoke, requesting for everyone to immediately withdraw. Soon after, he frowned and said, "This is an extremely special ancient land. Normally, it can't be opened, and now it seems like it can't be sealed up either. We can only wait for all of the cracks to close on their own. Fortunately, the passage is shrinking, and soon, it will disappear on its own." After his heart palpitated, he released a light breath. At this time, how could the primitive white sparrow race young woman be willing to accept this? She felt humiliated. Today, she suffered the greatest humiliation of her entire life. She had to wash it away, so she immediately made a request. The person in charge, covered in scarlet scales, immediately berated. Nonsense. Even if your origins are unordinary and your race has legendary experts overseeing it, you still can't act recklessly here. You know what that is, an ancestral-level source of pollution. A single mistake, and it will provoke a great disaster. He pointed downwards, pointing at the broken large black hand, ruined bell, emperor blood, and other things. He said that they couldn't touch it, that they couldn't let those auras rush into high heavens. That is a source of pollution. Coming into contact with it is inauspicious, and there is even more great karma behind it, hiding a tremendous disaster. When these words were spoken, not to mention the youngsters, even Chu Feng below was shocked. What kind of situation was this? Was that middle-aged man covered in red scales talking about that large black hand, or was he saying that the entire world of the living was the most serious source of pollution? That broken black hand was dripping with black blood. From Chu Feng's point of view, it was exceptionally inauspicious. It should be a source of pollution. However, that broken hand clearly reached down from high heavens, and it was cut off at the passage. The young silver-haired woman opened her mouth and said, "Uncle Scarlet, I don't ask for anything else. I don't want to act recklessly, and I only want to kill that disgusting humanoid creature below. Otherwise, every time I think about how my hand was once blasphemed by that kind of filthy creature, I can't bear it and my soul light will explode. This is an insult to our race. I, in the name of the primitive white sparrow race, earnestly ask Uncle Scarlet to take action and kill that disgusting creature, purifying that filthy and muddy region." The eyes of the person in charge of this region were chilly. He lowered his head and looked down, staring at Chu Feng. He was frowning. At first, he was not willing to make any abnormal movements and did not want to be involved with that foreign region. However, what the silver-haired woman said was reasonable. This involved the reputation of the entire primitive white sparrow race, and such a terrifying family could not remain unmoved after being humiliated. There had to be an explanation. "All right, kill him. He's just a small bug 2579. I reckon that after obliterating him, he won't cause the source of pollution to boil. It's nothing much. The middle-aged man covered in red scales spoke and prepared to take action. However, he was also very cautious. He used his authority and activated this region in high heavens. Not only did the black metal whip revive, but an earthen yellow lamp also appeared. The yellow light was faint, as if it could purify everything. Boom! Gotcha! The black lightning was thicker than a mountain, and a rain of blood poured down. In an instant, chilly winds howled angrily, and the world was in great turmoil. Various terrifying scenes appeared. It was as if they had arrived in an era where the heavens were obliterated and everything was cut down. Many mysterious figures floated past, with tears on their faces and strange smiles on their faces. Unimaginably powerful heavenly souls descended from the sky. Between heaven and earth, a mournful song vaguely sounded. The yellow lamp released a strange brilliance that extended downwards. Thunder exploded and chaotic energy appeared. A rain of blood poured down, and the saints and ancestors seemed to be continuously falling. Chu Feng had been looking up this entire time. Now, he felt his scalp turn numb. However, he was not too afraid. He loudly shouted, "This old one will take it!" "Evil creature, who are you going to be the old one for?" Above, the middle-aged man covered in burning scarlet multicolored light had a gloomy expression on his face. He activated the earthen yellow lamp, causing ancestral substance to fill the air. He began to suppress and kill. The abnormal scenes were shocking. "I'm going to be the old one for your ancestors," Chu Feng loudly shouted. He had a stone jar in his hands. This item was too mysterious. He directly aimed it at high heavens, wanting to see if the stone jar could take on these abnormal scenes. If there were signs that it could not hold on, then there was nothing more to say. He would turn around and run. Moreover, in any case, the white-clothed woman in the air was not far away. With her backing, there shouldn't be any mishaps, right? At the same time, Chu Feng also waved the long bronze strip in his hand. This piece of bronze that had fallen off from the coffin displayed its might again, wanting to whip high heavens. In the next moment, he directly raised his eyebrows. This was because he felt that the power of the long bronze strip had weakened a lot. It was not comparable to before. This thing contains some kind of accumulated energy. Just now I squandered more than half of it, so now it has weakened. This caused a bad feeling to arise in his heart. Especially when the heavenly might descended, covering the sky and covering the earth, there was still no reaction from the stone jar. There was not a trace of a smile on Chu Feng's face. Could it be that the stone jar would only react when he was at the brink of destruction? Today was a bold attempt, but he had a feeling that fate was not in his hands. He could not gamble like this. He did not want to rely on luck. Everything should be controlled by himself. He was about to withdraw, but suddenly, an indescribable fluctuation spread out. White mist rose, and the woman not far away underwent a change after being stimulated by the energy of high heavens. Beneath the blood-stained white clothes was a close-fitting and damaged armor that shone intensely. Her entire body was dazzling and resplendent and holy to the extreme. Had she completely awakened? A beam of light rapidly rose up, rushing towards the passage of high heavens. Who are you?" At this moment, the person in charge who was covered in red scales couldn't help but cry out in horror. Even his soul was trembling. Just like the other young people, he had just discovered that there was such a woman in the white mist. Only now, when the white mist rose up, did they completely see her clearly. "She's come up? She's come up!" Someone shouted loudly. His entire body went cold, and then he felt that his body couldn't even budge. In particular, that ancient lamp was like a candle in the wind. Not only was it about to be extinguished, but it was also crackling and full of crack. All of this happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint. The creatures in high heavens were all horrified. They felt a beam of white light rush into the heavens. That woman soared into the sky with unrivaled might and actually leapt up. Chapter 14:16. The creatures in this region all knelt down, unable to control themselves at all. They were surrounded and covered by a tremendous pressure, their bodies contorting, their souls trembling. Not a single person could maintain their previous arrogance. What, looking down on the lower realms, looking down on that filthy land, right now, it was they themselves who were shivering, teeth chattering, feeling endless fear. Their flesh unconsciously knelt down, submitting and worshipping. Even the person in charge of this region, the powerful middle-aged man covered in scarlet scales, was full of bitterness. He knew that he provoked a great disaster. What kind of background did this woman have? His heart was full of regret and fear. He actually allowed the other party to jump into the heavens. He would become a sinner. Formless heavenly might, unimaginable energy field, it was as if 3,000 worlds were being split apart, piercing through the barriers accumulated from past to present, attaching itself to this place. That was a sphere of white light. The woman rushed into the heavens, arriving from above. Pung! That so-called great killing weapon, the divine whip that released lightning, directly broke apart, turning into a lump of powder, scattering everywhere like dust. It was originally refined from precious materials, but now it seemed to have returned to ordinary, turning into ashes. This scene was too terrifying. What level of world-shocking energy was this? The most powerful or unmatched? As for the yellow lamp that had been summoned, it was even more powerful. It was a trump card, but the moment the woman rushed forward, it was also sent flying. With a loud bang, it disintegrated in the air, turning into a golden mushroom cloud. Energy immediately surged. Then, it was as if an expanse of seawater was evaporated. That world-shocking lamp was an extreme Tao weapon seized from a certain powerful ancient world, born before a mortal ancient era, yet it was blasted to pieces just like that. In reality, the consequences of the white-clothed woman's jump into the heavens were far more terrifying than one could imagine. Formless energy was released, making all of Region 51 tremble. The surface of the earth ruptured, black spatial cracks extending outwards. All types of ancient buildings rumbled. One had to bear in mind that this was Region 51, a place that suppressed all types of strange things. There was extreme Tao power, creatures that became heavenly ancestors, as well as mysterious paths sealed one after another. The stakes were too great. Hong Long Glong. In that instant, many extremely formidable restrictions were activated. Quite a few special regions shone, weapons that could blast through certain great worlds quickly reviving. Multicolored light immediately swept through the heavens above and earth below, about to purge heaven and earth with blood. A terrifying explosion rang out in the distance. Area 51 was in complete chaos. The primitive white sparrow race woman, the young man with the golden bloodline, and the person in charge of this region were all paralyzed on the ground. Their soul light was about to explode. They knew that they had caused a huge disaster. They tried their best to take a look at the woman in white. Was she the legendary rebel who had killed a Tao ancestor in prehistory? However, they couldn't do it. They couldn't raise their heads at all. Their necks were fractured, and they were firmly pressed to the ground. Their foreheads were broken, and blood flowed out. Their limbs creaked, and their internal organs and bones cracked. They were on the verge of exploding in an instant. All of this was caused by the woman's invisible aura flowing naturally. They were creatures of the high heavens, and the source of their bloodline could be said to be extremely powerful. Their ancestors were indescribable and incomprehensible, but now, why were they inferior to the glass people? The only thing they rejoiced about was that this woman didn't release any killing intent. It was all her instincts. Wisps of white mist filled the air and formed a pressure. Otherwise, if she wanted to crush them, even if it was just a wisp of energy, would any living being here be able to survive? It was too terrifying. There was actually such an existence among the creatures of that filthy land. Moreover, she was able to survive until this era. This simply overturned all of their understanding. Didn't they say that it was impossible for her to appear again after the change of era? Below, Chu Feng had long since been dumbstruck. The impact of that woman in white charging into the heavens was too great. After being silent for tens of thousands of years, she actually broke through the high heavens in an instant and entered. What did she want to do? Kill her way up just like that? Chu Feng really wanted to say, "Bring me along." But after coming back to his senses, he very realistically shut his mouth. Bringing her up was akin to courting death. He still didn't have the qualifications to enter the high heavens. In the end, everything else was empty. Only strength was real. He had to rely on himself to kill his way up to everything. We are sinners. A great calamity has been released. That source of pollution. Just what is its origin? Its source is terrifying. The scarlet-scaled man released a low roar. His spirit fluctuated violently. He felt that not to mention himself, even his entire clan wouldn't be able to survive. An uncontrollable and incomprehensible existence had been released. In terms of guilt, his 3 clans would most likely be exterminated in the future. The order of the high heavens was iron-blooded and strict. Those unmatched experts, the ones who set the rules, would inevitably be punished. They would purge unqualified overseers like them. If he wasn't curious and didn't use the lantern to suppress the people below, would this white-clothed woman have been drawn out? He already understood that this woman was most likely in an eternal slumber. Just what era and what era did she come from? She was a terrifying enemy that stood against the high heavens. Yet today, she was actually drawn over by him and revived in the high heavens. This was simply too terrifying. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, this woman didn't rush into the vast territory of the high heavens. She only raised her hand and suddenly made a grabbing motion between this region and the world. Hong! The heavens collapsed and the earth split apart. The heavens were pierced through. This was the high heavens. What was above the high heavens? She actually made a grabbing motion to tear apart space, as if she wanted to seize something from the heavens above. At the same time, she was also imprisoning Area 51. Endless energy runes, thousands of great Tao diagrams, and all sorts of laws and order surged towards her. She was capturing some kind of information, intercepting the source of heaven and earth. She wanted to obtain some imprints and things that outsiders couldn't understand. The scarlet-scaled man's mind was about to split apart. His entire body was covered in blood and his bones were broken inch by inch. However, he instinctively felt that the white-clothed woman seemed to be searching for some kind of trajectory and information left behind by predecessors. This was too inconceivable. Just what did she want to know? At the entrance to the high heavens, the several creatures that were shivering on the ground all wanted to know just what she wanted to do. Hong! A great Tao rumbled. It wasn't just this place. Even the worlds connected to the secret paths began to violently tremble. The heavens and earth were thrown into chaos. In a daze, it was as if 10,000 immortals had fallen, 100 million gods had been annihilated, and 1,000 worlds had collapsed. After that, the living beings in this area saw the diagram of the Grand Tao, laws, order, and so on in the white-clothed Empress hand transform into a dim and yellow piece of paper, and it became a letter that contained boundless energy of time. The scarlet-scaled man was horrified. His entire body trembled. It was actually like this. She was imprisoning some kind of trajectory, some kind of supreme great Tao fragment. She knew that someone had left a message for her. All the creatures present were shocked. What kind of great power was this? It actually left behind such a mark in the order and boundless great Tao of high heavens. After the passage of time, who knew how many eras had risen and fallen, it could actually condense into a piece of paper and leave behind this letter. It was too terrifying. At the same time, they were also shocked. This white-clothed woman was immeasurably powerful. Her grace was peerless. She could actually rely on some kind of feeling to understand the message left behind by predecessors and directly capture it and refine it into a letter. It was truly shocking and world-shattering. Everything was unpredictable and uncontrollable. In the end, Area 51 was broken into pieces. Then, all kinds of demonic auras rushed into the heavens and all kinds of divine energy surged. There were lords of fallen immortal clans who roared and wanted to break out of the seal. There was a supreme sacred ancestor's remnant soul that roared and broke free from a jar, causing the sky to instantly become boundless blood red. There was a mysterious vine that broke out from a jar and grew frantically, wanting to take root in the 3,000 worlds. Area 51 was in chaos. Ghosts wept and deities howled everywhere. This was originally a strange place that suppressed too many mysterious and dangerous things and creatures. Now, many of the seals cracked open and a dangerous aura bloomed. Not to mention the few people who were forced to kneel, even some of the creatures that had been sitting cross-legged in temples in the distance and hadn't moved for millions of years suddenly opened their eyes. Their faces paled in shock, and the dust on their bodies rustled. They were all greatly shocked. Disaster! Someone roared. These were some of the giants in charge of guarding Area 51. However, beyond everyone's expectations and even beyond Chu Feng's imagination, the peerless white-clothed woman stood in the air. After seizing some kind of source aura from high heavens, she actually turned into a stream of particles and an expanse of energy symbols that hung down. She left high heavens. Like a silver waterfall pouring down from the 9 heavens, she actually returned downwards and disappeared from the passage of high heavens. The scarlet-scaled male, the young female elite of the primitive white sparrow race, and the others all had their minds split apart. Their bodies were suppressed by a type of Tao mark of the 5 elements, and many parts were about to turn into a bloody paste. However, they still managed to survive. They didn't feel any resentment. At this moment, they were actually incomparably satisfied and happy. They were rejoicing because they actually survived. If even a speck of that woman's immortal light landed on their bodies, not to mention their current cultivation realm, even if they were several levels higher, their bodies and souls would still be destroyed. That white-clothed woman naturally ignored them. Perhaps in her eyes they were only as weak as ants, insignificant like dust. Nothing at all. There wasn't any excess killing intent or energy aura that landed on their bodies. They were treated as nothing. Below, Chu Feng was shocked. How did that white-clothed woman turn into a stream of particles? How did she turn into a resplendent and holy light particle? She returned like a storm. At this time, he felt a tremendous pressure that was who knew how many times heavier than before. If this continued, the consequences would be unthinkable. Fortunately, at the crucial moment, it was the stone jar again. It sparkled and shone, forming a soft and tangible realm wall. It was as if it was forged from time, but it was also as if it was glistening like mother gold. The strangest thing was that within that stream of particles, that yellowed piece of paper was floating up and down. It was immeasurable and indescribable. Between the 1,000 types of natural laws and 10,000 types of order, it was simple and ancient, as if it had existed since time immemorial, experiencing who knew how many great eras, waiting for those of later generations to read it. It had form, but in reality it was intangible. It had never been destroyed since the ancient times, existing in the fragments of the supreme great Tao. Now, it had reappeared, formed into a piece of paper by the white-clothed woman. It was mysterious and terrifying. Who exactly was it that left this behind, and what kind of message was it trying to convey? The white-clothed woman turned into a stream of particles and returned. An unmatched aura erupted, and the supreme and holy aura wrapped around that piece of paper returned in an instant. Chu Feng held the stone jar in his hand. His eyes flickered incessantly. He actually felt as if it was yesterday, as if it was an exceptionally familiar feeling. Chapter 14:17. A piece of yellowed paper was wrapped in a stream of particles, floating erratically. It was too strange, and then it fell rapidly. Chu Feng's mind was shaken. Just what kind of secret was this? He had a sense of déjà vu. In an instant, he thought of the reason behind it and understood why he felt a sense of familiarity. He had experienced something similar in real life. It was in the serene. Before he left, he crossed the chaos into the broken universe and found a wooden city adjacent to the world of the living. He had also seen a piece of yellowed paper. The shape and the accumulated mottled breath of time were too similar to the paper in front of him. They were suspected to be of the same origin. Back then, in that area, the fragments of time danced. A piece of paper flew out and heaven and earth collapsed. If not for the protection of the stone jar, he would have disintegrated in an instant and collapsed into dust. Now that he thought about it, although it was a long time ago, the blurry past gradually emerged and was no longer so hazy. That wooden city had left a strong trace of a person. A cold sword light flashed, cutting through the heavens and the earth, traversing the ages. That area of the wooden city had the breath and energy remnants of the person mentioned by number 9. Come to think of it, the yellowed paper was left by the person who cut through the ages with a sword. And today, the woman in white was peerless, seizing the origin of the heavens and smelting the Tao into a similar piece of paper. What was the meaning of this? Was the paper left by the same person? Chu Feng was shocked. This was a terrible and shocking thing. If it was true, it was simply unimaginable. A letter left several eras ago was integrated into the fragments of the Tao of heaven and earth, waiting for the latecomers to capture and read. What was that person trying to tell the latecomers? These things were beyond imagination, and the level involved was too high. Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He didn't expect that he had come into contact with some strange and hidden secrets long before he came to the world of the living. It was just that he couldn't understand it at the time. Number 9 once said that the universe of the serene and the earth he was on might be a reenactment of the past by some people. When he heard this terrible speculation, Chu Feng was shocked and horrified. Now it seemed that everything was possible. Otherwise, how could those miracles be left in the broken universe outside the chaos adjacent to the serene? Is it a letter left by one person? Chu Feng whispered. He really couldn't believe it. Perhaps his way of thinking was too simplistic. He thought about it carefully. The two yellowed pieces of paper had their own origins and were not written by the same person. This made the meaning even more profound. It's possible. Chu Feng's eyes were bright. His super eyes of fire and gold seemed to be able to see through the void and see through time. He wanted to witness the events of the past. He felt that if it wasn't done by the same person, then it would be even more astonishing. The ancient Soul River had been silent for many years, and there were celestial emperors attacking from time to time. The so-called underworld was shockingly ancient. It was far from being as simple as the reincarnation road in purgatory that he had seen. What he had experienced was merely a later branch road. There was still the main road that existed long before the so-called Age of Emperors. There was also the floating earth of the four poles. The heavens couldn't bury people. Who was the time furnace going to burn? Using earth to play out the past, but what kind of past was it? For a moment, Chu Feng's mind was in chaos. He thought of too many things in that short instant. Countless scenes flashed through his mind, as if they were going to form a line. However, at the crucial moment they were covered by a dusky mist. In the mist, the gray matter was surging. That was a strange aura surging. At this moment, he thought of Little Gray again. Back then, he was corroded by the gray mist, and there was even more indescribable misfortune involved. Now that he thought about it, there were some super-existences in the Yang realm that had fought with the gray matter in the other realm. It was worth pondering over and searching for them. Chu Feng's mind was in chaos. He thought of too many things. However, all of this actually happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. The reality before his eyes was that the white-clothed woman turned into an example stream. The Tao ancestor matter surged, wrapping around the yellowed paper and returning to that area from before. What was written on that yellowed paper? Chu Feng really wanted to know. In reality, back then, he had previously been incomparably close, even capturing that mysterious letter. To be more precise, he used the stone jar to receive the symbol information and other things before that piece of paper disappeared. Unfortunately, he couldn't see through it, unable to comprehend it in that instant. His cultivation realm determined that he couldn't decipher it. All of these things were still engraved on the stone jar. The white-clothed woman turned into a stream of particles and returned, appearing there. It continuously rumbled and shook intensely. Was that a type of rebirth in the form of energy? Regardless, Chu Feng just felt like something wasn't right. Later on, that piece of paper also turned into many symbols, resonating with that stream of particles, producing strange and terrifying irregular scenes. Hong. At Chu Feng's side, the stone jar released a ringing sound. It was sparkling and translucent, flowing with brilliant colors. It actually began to sway as well, entering a strange pulse. He discovered with shock that a corner of that piece of paper he captured in the wooden city back then appeared. He could vaguely see hazy handwriting. It actually appeared again? He didn't recognize it. Those words were too mysterious, as if every single character was a brilliant great Tao, resplendent and divine, suppressing all things in this world. However, he felt a certain type of fluctuation. Even though he didn't recognize those words, there was a type of meaning that was released through the great Tao, allowing him to hear and understand it. Above the heavens there is still what was going on. Chu Feng was shocked. He truly heard a type of sound. It was like a great golden bell, filling him with wisdom, attacking his heart and mind. This wasn't an illusion, but a true experience. Above the heavens, what else was there? He really wanted to know what was going on, doing his best to listen. Unfortunately, all of this was disrupted. Not far away, at the white-clothed woman's location, the stream of particles resonated, Tao ancestor matter surging, making the heavens tremble, the heavens about to completely collapse. If not for the stone jar's protection, currently shining, Chu Feng believed that he might not exist anymore. It was also precisely because of this that he couldn't hear that sound. Moreover, the most shocking thing was that the symbols on the paper and other things on the stone jar were actually captured by the white-clothed woman's stream of particles, allowing her to hear that type of sound. The symbols were still there, still attached to the stone jar, resonating with the mountain and river diagram on the jar. It was as if the mountains and rivers were rumbling, but they were all being read by the woman. Or it could be said that she was being read by the stream of particles. At the same time, Chu Feng was shocked and speechless. He was the first to obtain the paper, yet he never heard the truth. He never thought that this white-clothed woman would immediately obtain something, as if they were old friends meeting again. It had been a long time since they last met. He was a bit impatient, really wanting to know what was going on. What else was there above the heavens? He couldn't help but add a few more words: immortal, demonic, heaven, realm, black blood, gray matter, soul river, and others. All of these made him feel uneasy. No matter what words he added, it seemed to indicate that an even greater and more terrifying future was waiting for those who came later. Finally, it was no longer disorderly. Everything gradually calmed down. The so-called stream of particles turned into a vortex, within which time was swirling, secret force surging. That white-clothed woman actually began to appear again. Was she going to reappear? Chu Feng had too many questions in his heart. He was looking forward to this woman's true revival. He wanted to personally ask her about it. Chapter 14:18. The words recorded on the yellowed paper from the wooden city and the letter filled with the power of time were all seen by the lady in white. Chu Feng sighed. He had obtained the contents of the paper from the wooden city for many years, but he had never been able to comprehend it. In the end, it was because his level of evolution wasn't high enough and it was difficult for him to reach it. However, the origin of the paper was still attached to the stone jar, so he would have the chance to see it in the future. Boom! Not far away, the flow of particles shook violently once again. It was like a silver waterfall pouring down like a river of stars. The flow of particles transformed into a human form, and the blurry figure of the lady in white appeared once again. Her appearance was peerless, and her temperament was unparalleled. She was like a supreme empress overlooking the changes of the eras and wanted to interfere with the passage of time. At the same time, her eyes flowed with an indescribable charm that stunned the years. Was this a true revival? She suddenly opened her eyes. Unfortunately, part of her body was still made of particles. She was enshrouded in mist and surging with immortal qi. It was like a dream and seemed very unreal. Chu Feng opened his mouth. There were too many things he wanted to ask and his heart was filled with endless questions. He wanted to use the lady in white to unravel the mystery. She even wanted to speak up for Chu Feng. A beam of indescribable particles blossomed in front of Chu Feng like gorgeous fireworks, pointing directly at his will. You actually walked out from there. These simple words caused Chu Feng's body to tense up. It was as if he was being pressed down by the universe and almost suffocated. Fortunately, there was no killing intent or malice. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. He knew that she was talking about his roots. That place was referring to the earth. This was an instinctive feeling, so Chu Feng didn't need to think too much about it. The lady in white spoke once again. Her divine voice contained a supreme Tao rhythm. Although it was as pleasant as the sounds of nature, it also made evolvers feel as if they were facing an immortal world that couldn't be resisted. Another life walked out twice. What did she mean? These words were very incomplete. It was unknown which era the ancient language belonged to. One could only comprehend the meaning of the words by listening to the true meaning of the great Tao. Chu Feng was very anxious. He was guessing and trying to figure out what exactly it meant. Gradually, he came to a realization. Two people walked out from the earth. Or could it be that one person walked out of two lives? He had a flash of inspiration and speculation. At the same time, the woman's great Tao incantation turned into a blurry image. It was once a chaotic land floating in the universe. There was too much blood and fire, endless battles. In the end, a portion of it was plundered by someone and evolved into an azure planet. In the end, that person cut off Mount Tai on this planet. Without a doubt, that chaotic land was the origin of ancient Earth. Buzz. It was like the great rumbling of a great golden bell. It resounded throughout the ages and washed away everyone's soul light. Then, even heaven and earth were about to explode. It was a kind of invisible ripple. The greatest sound is silent. It was not transmitted to the mortal world. It only resounded in the ears of the right person in the right place. Boom. Chu Feng heard it and saw a person. It was the stalwart man who had cut off Mount Tai. His black hair danced wildly, and his eyes were like lightning. His gaze seemed to have traversed countless eras as it suddenly shone over. Chu Feng almost lost his mind and shouted, "Who is that?" In a daze, there seemed to be a beam of sword light traversing through the ages, cutting off the heavens, earth, and time. Then, Chu Feng saw another person walking out from Earth. His starting point was Earth, and he was also related to Mount Tai. It was actually accompanied by a bronze coffin, setting sail from Mount Tai. Next, a terrifying and grand image appeared. However, it was too blurry. The person who walked out from Earth with the bronze coffin was hidden. Two people, and it's one person with two lives. Both of them walked out from Earth. Chu Feng was astonished. Was this what the white-robed woman meant by 2 times? There had been 2 people who walked out from Earth. Or was there someone who had 2 lives and stepped out from Earth? Both times, heaven and earth were thrown into chaos, shocking the ancients and dazzling the contemporaries. Unfortunately, the two people's bodies were too blurry and couldn't be seen in detail. However, their figures were slender and strong, and they shared some of the same characteristics. Is it two people or one person with two lives? Chu Feng's heart was in turmoil. He simply couldn't calm down because the white-robed woman's mantra was too profound and unfathomable. It was difficult to comprehend it thoroughly. Most importantly, the woman's mantra wasn't meant to dispel his doubts. Instead, she was speaking to herself, expressing the resentment in her heart. The white-robed woman's hazy and indistinct face formed by the flow of particles had a strange expression on it. She was even slightly startled. It was obvious that her emotions were fluctuating after seeing Chu Feng. For such a character, her expression wouldn't change even if the sky collapsed and the earth caved in. This kind of situation was enough to indicate a serious problem. Reenact history and reconstruct the land of chaos. Do you want to replicate the glory and recreate the strength of a generation? This time, Chu Feng had comprehended most of the true meaning. Although there were some omissions, he still understood most of it. Even though there were still some incomprehensible words at the back, it was enough. Combining what Number 9 had said back then with the truth and images he had comprehended from the woman's mantra, Chu Feng was horrified. He had confirmed a certain nature. Then, his super-fiery eyes transformed into two mysterious golden symbols. He stared ahead as the images played out continuously. History had existed for a very long time. The earth that Chu Feng was on was merely a repeat of the past. Chu Feng was shaken to the core. He had seen the truth from the woman's mantra that made him feel uneasy and horrified. It wasn't just once, it wasn't just one life. The eras he had experienced, the 100 schools of thought he was familiar with, and the history of the Preqin dynasty, had all happened long ago. It was unknown how many epochs they had originated from. This history was being reenacted time and time again. It was being recreated by someone. In other words, the Earth's historical environment he was in was merely a repeat of the past. The poems and books he was familiar with and the famous historical figures he remembered weren't people of the recent thousands of years. Instead, they were people who had existed countless epochs ago. Zhuangzhou dreaming of the butterfly dreaming of Zhuangzhou. What am I experiencing? Chu Feng was drenched in cold sweat. Even the Zhuangzhou he spoke of wasn't someone of the recent thousands of years. Instead, he was someone who had passed away a epoch or more. He looked at the scenes and confirmed the suspicions he had long had. He had touched upon the terrifying truth. The environment on Earth was constantly changing. Generally speaking, there were two kinds. One was the modern Earth he had experienced, and the other was the desolate world where ferocious beasts and birds of prey ran amok. His face turned pale as he watched the scenes unfold. He finally understood why. In the long river of history, two people had walked out of the former chaotic lands and the later azure earth. Or perhaps one person had lived two lives. Those two people, or perhaps one person had lived two lives, were truly tyrannical and immortal. They were extremely powerful and indescribable. It was precisely because of this that some unknown and incomprehensible existences imitated their eras and played out the environment of their past. They wanted to see if a similar expert could be born. Some people believed that the same environment could create creatures of similar heights. The earth was a stretch of ruins. This was the truth. It had been destroyed for an unknown period of time. Perhaps it had been one epoch, or perhaps several epochs. The later generations were merely man-made. They replanted the seeds of life and civilization to recreate the environment that had been destroyed long ago. And there were only two kinds of such environments, the modern Earth and the desolate lands. They were the great eras where the two strongest people had been born. In my era and the homeland I was born on, the Earth, everything is replaying the past, repeating the old situation over and over again. The earth was just a stretch of ruins. Even the lesser Een was a stretch of ruins. The lesser Een, which was the universe where the earth was located, had been destroyed for many years, or even several epochs. The reappearance of vitality was man-made, reflecting the past. "Who am I?" Chu Feng asked. The truth made him shiver from head to toe. Since someone had arranged all of this, was there a pair of eyes overlooking the lesser Een and watching everything that was happening on Earth? Who is it? Why? He kept asking questions and murmuring to himself. Then, his eyes were fixed on the woman in white. He wasn't afraid even if she had profound cultivation. He wanted to know the nature of the matter. The woman in white was silent. Her eyes flickered with brilliance, and there were countless particles swirling in them, as deep as the universe. Ruins. The earth is a lesser ruins, and the universe is also a lesser ruins. The world of the living is just a central ruins. The woman in white said to herself. It was an ancient language that belonged to an unknown epoch. Chu Feng could only see some scenes of the mantra through the comprehension of the Great Path. This life should be the last time someone would replay the earth. They had even given up on the earth, and no eyes were watching the follow-up. This had also led to a deviation in history. For example, the lesser Een where the earth was located had a cosmic civilization that was different from the era that was supposed to be played out. This life, this era, has been abandoned, Chu Feng said to himself with a pale face. He didn't know whether he should rejoice or feel fear and regret. Then, he felt his scalp go numb. He thought about how history repeated itself again and again. In the countless eras that had been replayed earlier, had there ever been a creature that could stand shoulder to shoulder with those two? Or perhaps it should be said that it could stand shoulder to shoulder with those two? Someone wanted a third person to walk out of the earth, or that person's third life. Was there a success? Was there a semi-finished product? Was there a mutant? Chu Feng pondered. What did he count as among them? What position did he have? He was restless as he stared at the woman in white. Could it be indifferently said that fate could be arranged? Chu Feng's heart was cold. Chapter 14:19. Who was it that stood above the river of time, looking down indifferently, pulling out fate, fiddling with fate, directing this generation after generation? Chu Feng felt a chill run down his spine. There was actually an invisible hand behind this life's path. This hand covered the sky, raised the mortal world, and assembled the Rubik's Cube. It was too terrifying. Moreover, it didn't stop there. How many lifetimes before Chu Feng? In order to experiment and reproduce the power of those 2 or even 2 lifetimes, similar circumstances had been repeated. After so many years, the earth had repeated itself more than once. Just how many outstanding people had walked out and how many failures had there been? And what did he count as among them? Was this woman's old friend reenacting, or was it an unparalleled enemy of her level who was interested in experimenting? Was the invisible hand hiding in the darkness at the end of the River of Souls, or was it hiding in the terrifying path of ancient Luanhui's predecessor that existed before the Age of Emperors? Or was that creature just from the extreme other side of the heavens, stopping for a short while on a whim and then playing out all of this in the thousands of lifetimes? This was Chu Feng's instantaneous thought. All kinds of thoughts appeared. He felt that everything should be in this list of conjectures. No matter how deeply he thought about it, it was extremely terrifying. No one was willing to be manipulated by others, and no one was willing to be the reflection of 2 people or someone from 2 lifetimes, who didn't want to be the only one. However, even if his eyes were illusory, his mind was spinning, and his evolutionary ability was superb, there was no possibility of changing the past. All of this had already happened long ago. In a flash, he thought of number 9 and the others on the first mountain in the Yang realm. From the very beginning, he heard that the master of the Black Hand Li Su was number 4. After continuous contact, he learned that he could actually be ranked from number 1 to number 9. He had long since had doubts. Was that a creature of the sequence system? Until today, when everything happened before his eyes, he had some speculations. Would it be similar to him? Was there someone who was experimenting, recalling and molding something, and finally left behind number 1 to number 9? However, from some of number 9's words, it didn't seem like it. He worshipped the creature that had severed the ages with one sword too much and seemed to have followed him by fate? Chu Feng shook his head and no longer thought about it. His mind was a bit chaotic. He stared at the woman in white in a daze, wanting to obtain more information from her divine voice of the great Tao and even more hoping to converse with her. However, she didn't express anything. She was emitting a pure white and wholly immortal mist. Additionally, particles would occasionally escape and spread into the distance. "Old friend, it's been a while." After calling her many times and trying to communicate with her to no avail, Chu Feng became extremely daring and actually addressed her in such a manner. His eyes were profound and calm as he stared at the white-clothed woman. Of course, the stone jar was placed horizontally in front of him, helping him resist a lot of the invisible pressure. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to survive here. The entire world was, and the Chu. If it were not for her, she's energy, Chu God, she and would this. Otherwise. As for the outside, Fire Clan's people were trembling with fear. If not for the stone gate shining, stopping the drifting streams of particles, this place would have definitely become a land of death. The most crucial thing was that the human-shaped mountain ridge in the Supreme Restricted Land was rumbling about. That Supreme was swaying, its entire body covered in cracks, releasing sinister radiance, locking down the mountains and rivers. Otherwise, there might be a calamity of the heavens falling and the earth collapsing. She didn't react in the slightest. The white-clothed woman was hazy. When her beautiful eyes opened and closed, it was as if they could see through the ages, leading to eternity, never to return, undying into dust. Then, her essence energy suddenly turned into a wave of white energy that rushed out from her back. Finally, with a wung sound, the void trembled, and a dazzling symbol flickered as it quickly disappeared into the distance. The white energy was as if the heavens were collapsing, as if primal chaos was exploding. Unmatched symbols were produced, and in the end, it turned into a stream of particles, engulfing this small world. It transcended time, breaking through everything in its path, actually leaving just like that. What's going on? Chu Feng's face was full of confusion and shock. That woman's essence, energy, and spirit actually disappeared. She suddenly left. However, why was her physical body still there? Did she not want it anymore? As for the outside of the small space, the flame essences were in a state of near death. Their mood fluctuated between the 9-layered heavens and the great abyss, the fluctuations of their emotions too intense. When Chu Feng called him an old friend, the entire flame essence race's faces turned green. This brat was simply courting death. However, that woman didn't make things difficult for him and didn't make a move, which made them rejoice. They actually felt like they had a new lease on life after a disaster. If she left, then she left. As long as the people here were still alive, it was fine. Chu Feng stood in the space behind the stone door, a bit dazed. The white-clothed woman left without saying a single word, leaving him with too many questions. Did I scare away the white-clothed empress that the large black dog spoke of with a single sentence? Chu Feng said to himself, his expression as calm as ever. Dang. In an instant, the broken bell on the ground rumbled, shaking the stone jar until it instantly shone, forming a barrier of light that wrapped around him. Otherwise, he would most likely be in great trouble. Something bad was going to happen to him. Was this a warning? Chu Feng was speechless. He had just casually said something, yet it actually triggered such a great reaction? He was well aware that the origins of the broken bell fragment were also great. He had once seen the large black dog protect the male on the broken bell, so he should be someone from the same era as the white-clothed woman. Chu Feng's eyes had been tempered by the flames of the highest danger ground, and he had long since become super-discerning eyes. At this moment, he saw some clues. It's actually not the broken bell ringing, but something else. Below the broken bell, there was a black tail that was a foot long, and most of its fur had fallen off. This was a small dog tail? It was almost bald. It was buried under the sand and dust, and if it hadn't shaken the broken bell just now, it wouldn't have been exposed. It was actually related to that giant black beast. He really wanted to look at this creature from the corner of his eyes, but unfortunately, it was only a tail in the end, and not the main owner. Dog na, pei, mind your own business, Chu Feng said to himself. At this moment, Chu Feng didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he took a detour to observe the white-clothed woman not far away. She left behind her physical body, and her spiritual body left. What was she doing? And what else was there in the depths of this space? Was that woman's essence, energy, and spirit still in the depths of this place? As for the broken bell and the black dog tail on the ground, he didn't want to touch them, because they were dyed with special blood. The black was deep and mysterious, and it was also very strange, hiding an indescribable danger. Chu Feng was convinced that there was a great disaster there, and it vaguely contained inauspiciousness. It was as frightening as when he faced the gray matter in the past. How could this be? Chu Feng was astonished. What the white-clothed woman left behind was a shell, and not her true physical body. Even though he came closer, he still couldn't see the woman's face clearly. He could only vaguely see her, and could feel her peerless style, but he couldn't take a step closer. However, he learned the truth. There was a crack on the woman's back, and white mist was emitting from within. It was incomparably pure and holy, as if a great immortal world was surging with spiritual essence and flowing with endless life force. It was only a piece of human skin? How could Chu Feng not be shocked? This wasn't something that had just fallen off, but something left behind from the endless years before. The white-clothed woman shed her mortal body and exchanged her bones, leaving behind a shell. What kind of technique was this? Could she easily shed new divine embryos and immortal embryos? Even if it was just a piece of skin, it was sparkling and translucent, vivid and lifelike, just like a living person. Especially when he recalled the expression when she opened her eyes not long ago, it was truly unparalleled in the world. But where did her true body go? Thinking back to the giant black beast's words, did she cross the burial pit of heaven and earth, cross the single-plank bridge, and head for an indescribable place? It was said that even celestial emperors would die, and they would all fall halfway. Above high heavens there is heaven, above high heavens there is immortals and demons, and above high heavens there is still reincarnation. Chu Feng's voice was low. He was muttering to himself, repeating the words that the woman had said before, but did not finish. In his opinion, becoming a Heng king was just the beginning. There are some remnant thoughts left behind in her shell, and it already has such power. After receiving the information in the yellowed paper, is this taking it away to find her original body? Chu Feng searched around here, earnestly searching for something. Unfortunately, there were no more clues. There were some things here that he could not touch, for example, the giant arm dyed in black blood that led to high heavens, as well as the broken bell and broken tail. He had only picked up a long bronze piece earlier and kept it by his side. He suspected that it had fallen off from the bronze coffin. Little friend. In the outside world, the Flame Essence Race's people were calling out. Dao friends, seniors, please wait a moment. I will go forward and take a look. Chu Feng began to consider his path of retreat and how to leave. At the same time, he also wanted to know where the end of this space connected to. In this region, there was more than one great universe-level flower bud. The one from before was sparkling blue and incomparably terrifying. When the flower bud bloomed, It was as if a world had been opened. Pollen flew everywhere, and millions of scenes of the mortal world appeared. He had long since avoided it and did not dare to try again. It truly made him wish he was dead, and he could not control it. And on the road ahead, there was another dark purple plant. Its roots were rooted in a black hole, and black liquid surged out. It was truly too terrifying. Apart from this, there was a spring on the other side. The mist was dense, and a gray flower bud could be vaguely seen swaying within. When divine light streaked out, it was like an explosion of immortal thunder. It was too astonishing. There are 3 great universe-level flower buds here. Chu Feng sighed. This was a rare heavenly treasure. Although absorbing the pollen might indicate inauspiciousness and death, it was still an opportunity that evolved beings yearned for even in their dreams. What if they succeeded? That was the crucial condition for consolidating the foundation before the ultimate leap. Along the way, there were countless giant rocks that had been weathered and turned into fine powder with a light touch. There were also traces of a dried-up sea. The blue sea had turned into mulberry fields, and everything had long since changed. It was unknown what this place was like millions and millions of years ago. Desolate and desolate couldn't even describe the vastness and vastness of this place. At the end of the road there was actually a wormhole. It was very quiet and cold, and there were traces of the aura of the pure and holy particle flow. That woman in white had actually left from here. Chu Feng hesitated for a moment. After careful investigation, he did not find any danger, so he placed the stone jar in front of him and stepped inside. Then, in the blink of an eye, he was shocked to discover that the outside world was a slightly familiar landscape. Or perhaps it could be said that it had similar characteristics that belonged to the Great Yang realm. After coming out of this wormhole, was it the outside world of the supreme forbidden area? He did not know where that woman had gone, but now he had reached the end of the road. There seemed to be a layer of boundary membrane that could be penetrated with a light push, and the outside world was the mountains and rivers of the Yang realm. If he left from here, he would definitely be able to easily avoid the questioning of the flame spirit race and even the condemnation later on. After all, he had caused too much activity in the space behind him. Chu Feng thought about it and did not leave immediately. Instead, he went back along the original path and took off the God-given armor of the fire spirit race. He took out some of the magnetic mountain and river diagram and other things that were temporarily lent to him, and tried hard to hit the entrance of the small space. He wanted to return them to the fire spirit race. After all, they had treated him well before. Even if he left, there was no need for him to keep these things. Although they were very precious, he had the stone jar to protect himself. Ah, seniors of the fire spirit race, my life has come to an end. I will go with the wind and return to nature. I have failed a great trust, so please take good care of the precious treasures. Chu Feng shouted from the depths of the small space, as if he had encountered a disaster and was about to die. He wanted to cut off his roots before leaving. If one day they met again in Chu Feng's real body, it would not be so embarrassing. Now that he had changed his name to someone else, Zhou Jingde, he had caused trouble here. He had roasted the creatures of the world and made a mess of the world. He had most likely caused the fire spirit race's displeasure and resentment. Instead of this, it was better to return empty-handed. What happened? Did Zhou Jingde die? He encountered danger inside. As expected, the ominous lands cannot be explored. Just like our ancestors, he either suffered heavy injuries or met with death. The people of the fire spirit race sighed, feeling incomparably regretful. At the same time, they also had a strange feeling in their hearts. Their emotions fluctuated. They felt that this Zhou Jingde was truly kind. Even before his death, he had painstakingly brought back the precious treasures of the fire spirit race. As expected, he had entrusted them to a loyal and kind person. Little friend, have a safe journey. The fire spirit race held a memorial service. Chu Feng had run away. He held the stone jar in his hand and moved unhindered towards the wormhole. People from the outside couldn't enter at all. The remains left behind by the white-clothed empress were too terrifying. No one could withstand that kind of pressure. Only an item with an unfathomable origin like the stone jar could protect them. Whoosh! A layer of boundary barrier opened with a light touch. Chu Feng returned to the outside world. Looking down at the towering mountains, the verdant forests, and the surging rivers, his heart felt comfortable. He had completely broken away from his previous nervousness. It was a pity that he didn't know where the essence, qi, and spirit of the white-clothed woman had gone. He felt a little regretful. Where is this? As King Heng, Chu Feng's strength was comparable to that of a heavenly venerable. He had become a true master in the world of the living and no longer needed to hide. He stopped for a moment and instantly captured a snow-white three-tailed silver fox from the mountains and rivers. In an instant, he understood the information he wanted to know. It's actually hundreds of millions of miles away from the supreme forbidden area. Now, he had long since left the forbidden area of the fire spirit race and even crossed several large provinces. He turned back to look for the wormhole and found that it had disappeared. After coming out, he couldn't find the path that led to that space. Forget it. Anyway, I've already come out. At this stage, there's nothing worth staying for. If there's a day when I need to pick the great cosmos flower bud, I'll enter through the main entrance of the forbidden area and get to know the fire spirit race again. Boom! Chu Feng stood in midair and clenched his fists. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. His hair was as resplendent as platinum. It was extremely dazzling. A powerful aura shook the heaven and earth. I'm King Heng. There are some things I need to solve. His eyes were frightening like a beam of light from the sun. He wanted to kill Taiwu and avenge his parents and friends. He remembered this person all the time. Why did he enter the world of the living? It was because he wanted to see some people and kill the great martial heavenly venerable. Although he had seen the black yak and the Manchurian tiger in the world of the living, what about the others? Some of them might never be seen again. After being killed by Taiwu, they didn't have enough talismans to protect them when they entered the cycle of reincarnation. Perhaps only a few of them could reappear in the world. Until now, there was no trace of his parents or the little yellow cattle. Many of them might never see them again in this lifetime. Whoosh! Chu Feng disappeared from this place, and soon arrived at a giant city. He easily stepped into a super teleportation domain. He wanted to go to the Azure province that was hundreds of millions of miles away. That was because the great martial heavenly venerable's mountain gate was in the Azure province. As the martial madman's grand disciple, no one had dared to provoke Taiwu apart from an equally powerful opponent throughout the years. That was because the martial madman's lineage was too terrifying. Anyone who dared to make a move against someone from this lineage would definitely bring about a great calamity. However, Chu Feng had come today. Stepping out of the teleportation domain, Chu Feng entered the core area of the Azure province. The next moment, he soared into the sky as King Heng and disappeared into the depths of a certain mountain range like a stream of light. He then headed directly for the great martial heavenly venerable's mountain gate. Taiwu, it's been a long time since we last met, old friend. Chu Feng's voice was cold. He tore open the void like a bolt of lightning and soon arrived outside the great martial heavenly venerable's mountain gate. Everything was going smoothly. Today, he was going to do something big. He was going to slaughter the great martial heavenly venerable and annihilate the martial madman's lineage. Chapter 1420. Yang Realm, Qingzhou, Martial Madman's Dao Field. The mountain gate was tall and majestic and grand. The two black mountain peaks were like two walls that connected the heavens. They were extremely majestic and formed two gates that blocked the path. There was only a single path in the middle. The two mountains' auras were terrifying. There were some mysterious symbols flickering on them from time to time. They were hazy and emitted strands of primal chaos energy. This was the embodiment of the mountain guarding domain. As a direct descendant of the martial madman's bloodline, how could the extreme martial heavenly lord's mountain gate be an ordinary place? It seized the fortune of heaven and earth. If one were to recklessly charge in, there would be danger at every step. Although the two mountain peaks were pitch black like the bodies of gods and devils, they were also emitting dense essence energy. It was truly a rare holy land. On top of the mountain peak, a golden waterfall surged and roared. It whistled down like thunder and was majestic. There were even silver phoenixes circling above, releasing a divine aura. Chu Feng had arrived. Although he was a youth, his posture was calm and had an outstanding temperament. He stood with his hands behind his back as he gazed at this rare divine land. "This is a good place," he said softly. Such beautiful mountains and rivers were usually pregnant with auspicious signs and rare great medicines. It was an ideal place for seclusion and evolution. In front of the mountain gate, there was a bottomless pool that was emitting 5-colored radiance. Beams of light rose one after another, emitting a shocking amount of energy. There was a Qilin-like divine beast lying in the water. This was the mountain guardian beast. Chu Feng glanced at it and instantly understood that this ancient beast was actually at the quasi-Empyrean realm. It was truly extraordinary, but he didn't hesitate and strode forward towards the extreme martial mountain gate. One stone step after another, it was quite long. It was like a road leading to the heavens. The Dragon Road extended all the way to the mountain gate. On both sides of the road, there were ancient pines like small mountains and giant vines like coiling dragons. The aura of life was astonishing. It should have long transformed into a great demon, but it was imprisoned here and couldn't communicate with its spirit. Chu Feng had attained the Heng King physique, and could be considered the most powerful among divine kings. Since ancient times, this was a world-shocking Dao fruit, and now it was comparable to an Empyrean. His youth had an unparalleled bearing, and along the way, few people actually dared to approach and question him. Even though he looked like he was only in his teens, his temperament was too outstanding, as if he was a young immortal king that walked the world. Every move he made formed a world of its own, containing natural laws and principles. As he walked and as his sleeve fluttered, lightning could be faintly seen, and divine chains of order interweaved. It was enough to terrify this world. At the same time, his appearance was delicate and handsome, and he himself was elegant and extraordinary, as if he'd transcended the mortal world. He was like a true dragon that was moving and lying dormant between movement and stillness. When he moved, he could split the 9 heavens apart. When he was still, he could sense the tranquility of the world and listen to an extraordinary song of the Tao. "This Tao friend, are you here to participate in the Immortal Bud's sacred fruit gathering?" someone finally asked. In the past few days, a grand event was being held in the Empyrean of the extreme Martial Tao Plaza. Although most of the participants had already entered the venue, there were still people who had arrived over the past few days. Therefore, this was also the reason why very few people came forward to interrogate him. However, if one wanted to enter the depths of the Pure Land, they still had to be patrolled and present the invitation letter condensed from purple gold Tao talismans. Chu Feng sneered. With a wave of his sleeve, he directly stepped into the mountain gate. However, very soon, there were divine level evolvers obstructing his path, wanting to examine the invitation letter. However, how could their cultivation be compared to Chu Feng's? The latter's loud roar was enough to shatter divine level evolvers, and there was simply no way to contend against him. However, Chu Feng instantly captured their soul light with the eternal monarch Tao fruit and knew that there was a grand event here. Thus, he immediately changed his mind and didn't rush in violently. In a split second, everyone felt an auspicious aura assaulting their faces. An invitation letter condensed from purple gold Tao talismans appeared, and then that person disappeared in a flash. No one stopped him because they thought that a great cultivator who had accepted the invitation had come and was a super evolver. In reality, there were indeed many distinguished guests that came to the sect these past few days, and there were even celestial venerables that came in person. This was because the celestial bud holy fruit gathering was very grand. Usually, it would attract many super-powerful races to participate and exchange rare pollen and holy fruits in the Yang realm. This time, the martial madman had revived and once again ruled the Yang realm. As the successor of one of his branches, the martial madman and the others were naturally happy and excited. They applied to hold the celestial bud holy fruit gathering this time and became the host. Very good. Let's see if there are any immortal buds and holy fruits that I like. Chu Feng smiled. He came here not only to destroy the extreme martial heavenly venerable, but he also had a further goal, and that was to conquer this territory. Later on, he would make use of the rich vitality here and the exotic land that had been accumulated for countless years to plant his 3 seed. He was able to reach this step all the way because of the 3 seeds in the stone jar. Unfortunately, the quality of the soil in the lesser netherworld could no longer nurture the seeds to germinate. Ever since he came to the Yang realm, Chu Feng had been waiting for an opportunity. As long as he built the strongest foundation, he would let the 3 seeds germinate again. Now that he had completed the baptism in the supreme forbidden land, his flesh and bones were no longer sluggish, and he had cleansed and broken through the shackles of the past. Even his Yang realm body, which had a slightly lower evolution level than the lesser netherworld, had become a legend. His golden body was indestructible, and his saint level was spotless. He was like a Buddha walking in the Yang realm. Currently, he had reached the strongest realm in his own evolution, and there was no more room for improvement. It was time to absorb pollen again. Inside the mountain gate was another scene. Orchids and orchids were everywhere, and the spiritual fields were neatly planned and orderly. The soil was crystal clear and overflowing with colors. The fragrance of herbs was shining brightly, and all kinds of auspicious clouds were blooming. Some of the mountains were coiled under the cliffs, and their silver eyes were like lightning, overflowing with spiritual vigor. Some of the volcanoes were releasing dazzling golden clouds, which were the golden crows swallowing and spitting spiritual essence. Some of the swamps had dragons leaping out, and the dragon roars shook the heaven and earth. Every mountain peak was like a fairyland, overflowing with colorful lights and thick immortal chi. It was unknown how many times stronger than the 2 mountains at the mountain gate. There were many evolvers on the way, but no one stopped Chu Feng, and he was unimpeded. To this day, how many people dared to attack the territory of the great martial lord? Just the words of the martial madman's lineage was enough to shock the world. The most important reason was that the martial madman had recently been resurrected, and everyone was convinced that he was extremely powerful, and no one could keep him in check. Up ahead, there were many palaces, all of them made of jade, flowing with an immortal aura. They were truly bejeweled jade palaces, many of them floating in midair. In this area, all kinds of divine birds and beasts became embellishments. Golden-winged pings, fiery red sparrows, and others were circling around, holding zoysia fruits and peaches of immortality in their beaks. The disciples of the great martial lord were welcoming and sending them off, and the atmosphere was lively. Chu Feng arrived and approached the group of palaces. Among them, there was a group of silver buildings made of rare secret gold. They were exceptionally grand, and that place was the most popular. This was the main venue of the Immortal Bud Sacred Fruit Gathering, and the participants were all influential. Many of them were disciples of famous sects, and there were even higher-ups participating. Chu Feng was surprised to see some familiar faces. They were people he had met in the 3 battlefields, such as the Peacock race, the Buddhist race, and the Tao race. In fact, he even saw some old friends he was good friends with. Heroes were gathered here, and there were goddesses from various races and proud sons of heaven from various sections. After thinking for a while, Chu Feng immediately understood that this kind of gathering was too important to these people. Some of the rare flowers and fruits were related to their Tao fruits, and it was related to their future. That was because in every realm, there were recognized as the strongest and most effective flowers and fruits, but it was almost impossible to gather all of them with the power of a single sect. At present, this kind of gathering was extremely necessary. It possessed great significance and was loved by the heaven-warping geniuses. The elders of various clans also did their best to satisfy them, helping them exchange and trade for the most powerful flowers and fruits. Chu Feng carefully understood, and he was also quite concerned about this distinguished gathering. It's actually the wisdom fruit of Abu Jinpa ancient temple. Someone cried out in surprise. It was clear that this kind of desire came from the bottom of their hearts and was difficult to conceal. There's also the medicine refining fruit of the prehistoric demonic palace. It's too astonishing. It can even be plucked like this? Don't be shocked, calm down a bit. There's even the mysterious pollen from the Temple of Longevity's abandoned land. Someone said softly, telling his companions to pay attention and not lose their composure. After Chu Feng heard these words, he was also shocked. It seemed like the value of this distinguished gathering was extremely high, and it was worth paying attention to. That was because he was especially concerned about the flowers and fruits of the Yang realm. He had long since had a deep understanding and knew some of the details. In the past, when he had just arrived in the Yang realm for a period of time, he had once paid attention to the relevant reports of the 4 great evolutionary authoritative journals of the Yang realm. Among them, the Black Blood Research Institute had publicly commented on a few well-known flowers and fruit. Among them, the wisdom fruit of Abu Jinpa ancient temple and the demon refining fruit of the prehistoric demonic palace were impressively listed. They were known as the strongest fruits of the Yang realm corresponding to their respective evolutionary realms. Meanwhile, the fruits of the Temple of Longevity's abandoned land and the Phoenix Prison Cemetery were also listed as the strongest fruit. They were all mythological legends that occupied a dominant position in their respective evolutionary realms. It was reported that the ancient powerhouses and top-notch giants of the Yang realm were fortunate enough to come into contact with these kinds of fruits when they were young. Therefore, every sect was extremely concerned. There wasn't a single one of them who didn't want to prepare for their disciples, and they even hoped to collect all of them one day. At this moment Chu Feng arrived. He had a strange expression on his face. Not only did he want to slaughter Taiwu, but he also wanted to take all of the strongest flowers and fruits in this Tao field and loot them clean. Tao friend, you look a bit unfamiliar. May I ask which sect you come from, and what fruit do you want to exchange? In the main hall, a young divine king with an extraordinary temperament and a head full of silver hair that flowed like a waterfall greeted Chu Feng politely with a smile on his face. Looking at his attire, he should be a core disciple of the Taiwu lineage. His strength was rather impressive, and he was one of the core divine kings of the Taiwu lineage. Who am I? Chu Feng smiled with a soaring and confident demeanor. Today, he wanted to tell the Taiwu lineage that he was Chu Feng and that he had come. Today, he wasn't here to exchange for the flowers and fruits, but to deliver a great gift to the Taiwu lineage. Taiwu, I want to send you a death knell in front of everyone in the world. Chu Feng's expression was peaceful. Then, he revealed a brilliant smile and walked forward. Chapter 14:21. How is your teacher? Chu Feng asked calmly, revealing his snow-white teeth and a very bright smile. He did not expose himself immediately because he was afraid of an accident. What if the Grand Martial Saint escaped? It had to be said that if others knew what he was thinking, they would definitely be flabbergasted. They would be shocked by his audacity and think that he was conceited and arrogant. Who was the Grand Martial Saint? He was a famous person among the celestial venerables who had inherited the mantra of the martial madman and was one of the core lineages. It was ridiculous that someone was afraid that he would escape. It could only be said that Chu Feng was too confident. After becoming King Heng, he had the confidence to break through the heavens and had the strong belief to look down on all the famous celestial venerables. It did not matter if he was the grand disciple of the martial madman or one of the descendants of the source of darkness. Since Chu Feng had come looking for him, he would kill all who dared to stop him. The silver-haired, handsome divine king was the sixth disciple of the grand martial saint, Yun Heng. He was quite surprised and could not help but take a few more glances at Chu Feng. He felt that although this person looked young, he was very mature and arrogant. He actually dared to talk to him like this, as if he was an elder talking to a nephew. This made him feel that it was rather absurd. This person was clearly a youth. That kind of exuberant vitality, that kind of golden budding spirit, was very difficult to conceal. The aura of life was rich and astonishing. In the field of evolution, this could be used as a basis to judge one's age. It should be the body of a youth. My teacher is fortunate to be allowed to step into the ancestral court of the North. He might be able to ask for a few peerless medicines to satisfy the needs of everyone. He will return in a day or two, Yun Heng answered calmly and naturally. He did not rely on his status as a core disciple of the Grand Martial Saint and did not reprimand Chu Feng. However, he also inadvertently highlighted the supreme status of his own lineage. No one could look down on him and should look up to him. When he said to go to the ancestral court of the North, it was needless to say that he was going to the northernmost place where the martial madman was reviving. This showed some kind of invincible foundation. The purpose of this trip was to seek the great medicine, which also explained some problems. In order to meet the needs of the various sects and sects, the Extreme Martial Association harvested the supreme great medicine in the place where the martial madman was in seclusion, which made people revere it. Chu Feng was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled. He was just about to consume all of the strange pollen. The immortal lightning sacred fruit cultivated by the martial madman was clearly extraordinary. Fellow Taoist Tai Wu, you've worked hard. We're very grateful. Chu Feng's bright smile looked very sincere and sincere. However, this made Yun Heng even more shocked. Who was this young man? How could he say such things again and again? Was he really the same generation as Master? Honored guest, may I ask which branch you are from? Please tell us your name. Yun Heng asked. He did not dare to be too arrogant. He did not use his sect's ancestral court to show off the current prosperity of the Tai Wu lineage. Chu Feng said, My name has long gone with the mountains and rivers. There's no need to mention it. Nobody knows about me. It's just that I became friends with fellow Taoist Tai Wu when we were young. We can be considered old friends. It's a pity that I'm still wasting my time in the celestial venerate domain. Brother Tai Wu, on the other hand, has already set foot here long ago. His name is known throughout the world. This time, I'm just here to reminisce about the past. I really miss it. That's why I'm here to visit a friend. When Yun Heng heard this, his expression instantly became solemn. This young man was actually an old demon? If that was the case, he most likely consumed some great medicine to make up for the depletion of blood qi caused by his aging body. Yun Heng thought that this kind of person was destined to be very frightening. With the ability to become a celestial venerate again, he was almost like a monster who had lived a second life. Once he broke through, he might become a peerless celestial venerate. Senior, you're full of blood qi now. After refining your flesh into great medicine, you'll definitely be able to reach the heavens and look down on the world, Yun Heng said. He also very politely invited him to move to the Golden Palace not far away to rest. That was the place where esteemed guests resided. They were all envoys of sects, and even the leaders of sections. There were quasi-celestial venerates, and there were even true celestial venerates. One could imagine how grand the immortal thunder sacred fruit would be this time. A sect leader would come personally, and a famous expert would come to visit. In the Yang realm, Life forms that could cultivate to the level of a mighty person usually spent a long time. Their blood chi, bones, and tendons were mostly old, and their bodies had long been worried about rotting. Therefore, under normal circumstances, celestial venerates were the high-end combat power that could move freely. They could walk freely everywhere. With such a person personally coming to the scene, it was naturally considered a grand occasion. Chu Feng smiled. He was detached from the noisy and chaotic place. This was what he needed. At his level, he did not need to fight with those so-called geniuses. He was not interested in squeezing with them in the exchange meeting outside. In his eyes, his opponents were only those old fellows, and those who were not celestial venerates were not worthy of his attention. He walked towards the Golden Palace. In his reserved manner, there was also an inexplicable aura circulating, showing off his extraordinary status. Everyone was shocked to find that Yun Heng, one of the most favored disciples of the martial madman, was personally accompanying him and leading the way for a youth. They were deeply shocked. Who exactly was this? Could it be someone from the same bloodline that could confront the martial madman and was also one of the origins of darkness? Some people guessed. After all, in so many years, only a certain celestial venerable from that bloodline had fought with the martial madman often. After so many years, he was unharmed and his sect prospered. That's not right. If it was that bloodline, they would not receive the respect of the martial madman's disciples. Could it be someone who came out of the sea of tribulations? Someone else said in a low voice. It's very possible. Since the martial madman has revived, perhaps the supreme calamity lord in the sea of tribulations has also returned. That is an invincible existence with great roots. Some people guessed that the Yang realm was finally going to be unified. Perhaps this was someone from the divine dynasty? Chu Feng looked at the crowd and said, "Ah, looking at so many youthful faces, it really makes one feel gratified. This generation is far better than our generation. Another golden age has arrived." Everyone was speechless. "How old are you? Which generation are you from? How dare you make such a comment?" However, no one was willing to stand out to scold him. What if he really was an old demon? Yun Heng's company had already revealed some clues. Everyone was silent, watching him go into the distance. In the future, it's better to let the young people fight for supremacy. It's time for me to retire. Maybe I should teach 1 or 2 disciples or take in a few maids. Chu Feng muttered to himself. Actually, those people were even older than him. However, he did have some ideas. At this level, it was no longer suitable to fight with people of the same generation. No one was worthy of him fighting. Yun Heng, who was accompanying him, twitched his mouth but did not say anything. Even if he was an old monster, his tone was a little too arrogant. After all, there were divine kings from various races in that group just now. Could it be that this person's background was really not simple? He needed to tell his master that he had to come and see this person personally. In reality, this was exactly the result that Chu Feng wanted. He waited quietly for his enemy to come and see him as soon as he returned. He really could not wait any longer. Chu Feng said, "Nephew Yun Heng, your master's residence contains the true charm of the great Tao. I think you will be able to take that step sooner or later. The Yang realm is destined to have one more mighty person." Hearing the word nephew, Yun Heng, who had already been on the path of evolution for thousands of years, felt his face tremble slightly. This should really be a senior, right? Otherwise, this young man kept acting like an old man. It was really too much. Chu Feng's arrogance and self-confidence really made the Taiwu lineage especially solemn and respectful. He was brought to a private resting area for distinguished guests. Yun Heng and an experienced elder personally accompanied him. "Fellow Taoist, please take a look. That is the medicine field of our celestial venerable cave abode. It contains many rare treasures, all of which are rare in the world. Among the medicinal herbs corresponding to their respective evolution realms, they are ranked at the top. The elder of the Taiwu lineage pointed to a misty area outside the Golden Palace. It was colorful and full of essence qi. That was all sorts of great medicinal herbs swallowing the essence of heaven and earth. This was at Chu Feng's request to explain to him the strange flowers and herbs of this grand event. The focus was naturally on the Taiwu lineage's collection over the years. The Golden Palace floated in the air, and the angle was very good. One could overlook the picturesque scenery below, and also see a spirit medicine field. That place was dense and filled with auspicious light. Crystal petals danced in the air, and the medicinal fragrance turned into a beam of light that shot into the sky. One could vaguely see the precious flowers and divine fruit. It was really extraordinary. Chu Feng sighed from the bottom of his heart, because he felt that those things were all his. Great, they are all good things. They are all exceptional. There is actually a divine plant from the prehistoric demon imperial palace, and there is even the legendary divine lotus for crossing the sea of tribulations. Fellow Taoist Taiwu's collection is too shocking. Chu Feng's face was full of smiles, and it was even more brilliant than the flower buds in the medicine field. He was even happier and more proud than the elder of the Taiwu lineage. In his eyes, all of these had already become his spoils of war. Although he had 3 seeds in hand, he also wanted to test the efficacy of the strongest pollen and fruit recommended by the 4 major research institutes in the Yang realm. He had his eyes on all of them. Although there was a domain to protect them, and the place was surrounded by fog, with Chu Feng's super fiery eyes of truth, what could he not see through? Moreover, with his current attainments in the domain of a heaven master, this so-called super-defensive domain of the medicine field could not stop him at all. In a while, he would be able to collect his great medicine, and it was destined to be an unstoppable place. This is really too good. The divine medicine is shocking, and all of them are of good quality. I am very comforted. Chu Feng exclaimed continuously. This made the elder of the Taiwu lineage and Yun Heng feel strange. Although they were a little annoyed and felt that it was inexplicable, no matter what, they did not think that this was a crazy person who wanted to rob all of the great medicine, and also wanted to kill their celestial venerables. There were more than 10 golden palaces in this area, and all of them floated in midair. All the distinguished guests were separated, and they did not disturb each other. Of course, there were also distinguished guests who were familiar with each other. They gathered together, chatting about the past and the present, and comprehending the fruits of Tao together. It was very peaceful. Some people were talking about the achievements of the Taiwu lineage in this life. Many of them were extremely glorious, such as defeating 5 great enemies in one day, which shook tens of states, and when the Taiwu became a celestial venerate, the strange phenomenon that shocked the old monsters of all sects, and they were extremely shocked. Chu Feng heard the discussion of the distinguished guests in a golden palace not far away. He looked at Yun Heng and said, "Fellow Taoist Taiwu's life was glorious, and his extraordinary years were amazing. Virtuous nephew, tell me about the bright and glorious past of your master." At the mention of these, even a core disciple like Yun Heng, who was steady, felt proud of his master's past achievements. It was really too shocking. Therefore, he did not hold back and pointed to a divine mountain in the distance. It was mottled with an ancient aura, and there was actually a large area of carvings on the mountain, which recorded some old event. A mountain was a part of the past, and there were some divine treasures suppressed in the mountain. It could be said that some of the rare collections of the Taiwu lineage were there, and it was also considered an important place in this pure land, where all kinds of rare and precious treasures were hidden. Great, that's really amazing, it's all very good. Chu Feng listened to the past events of the Taiwu lineage and nodded continuously. Actually, he was gratified by the extraordinariness of those treasures. In his heart, he naturally already thought that these were all his, and he was going to collect them all in a while, and not even a hair would be left. Oh, I heard that fellow Taoist Taiwu's rare failure was that after entering the Little Yin realm, he wanted to find the ultimate treasures of the Yang realm that were lost outside. In the end, it seemed like he had a bad start. In a palace in the distance, someone was talking like this, and he was also a distinguished guest. The small underworld is nothing more than a cemetery, a dilapidated land. Those demons and monsters have all been wiped clean by fellow Taoist extreme martial. They're just a group of ghosts not worth mentioning. Another person sneered. Chu Feng heard the conversation of a few distinguished guests, and his eyebrows moved slightly, and a cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. At this moment, a bell rang from afar, and many people turned to look at the golden communication bell in the clouds. When Yunheng received the report, he immediately revealed a look of joy and said, "My master has returned. He set off in advance, and will be back soon." When Chu Feng heard this, he seemed even happier than him. He said, "That's really good, I'm just waiting for Taiwu to return. Thinking of the past, my heart is filled with melancholy. How can I relieve my worries? Only Taiwu." The elder at the side was shocked, and Yunheng was also very surprised. This person's emotions were slightly strange. Could it be that his master was really a close friend? He actually looked forward to it so much, and it could even be said that he was concerned about it. Fellow Taoist Taiwu is about to return. We have been looking forward to it for a long time. We haven't met for thousands of years, old friends, we meet again, how gratifying. Not far away, in a golden palace, someone laughed and said, "That's right, my heart is gratified." Chu Feng laughed. Sogu. Chapter 1422. This comforting of yours is a little too much. Yunheng thought to himself. He really wanted to pout. What has it got to do with you? You're laughing so happily. I really don't know what you're talking about. Hee. Chu Feng's smile did not diminish. It was from the bottom of his heart. He had not looked forward to it so much in a long time. He clenched his fists so tightly that they were about to explode. He wanted to punch Tai Wu right in front of him. However, he still had to bear with it for now. If Tai Wu got the news and escaped in advance, it would not be good. His wish would be for naught. Actually, he was thinking too much. Tai Wu had a high status. If he knew that the ghost from the little netherworld was here, he would definitely kill them without caring about anything. It could only be said that Chu Feng cared too much and was too confident. He was so conceited that he thought that the enemy would run away just by hearing his name. Dear nephew, fellow Taoist Tai Wu has been glorious in his life. Has there ever been a special case of him running away without fighting? Chu Feng asked. This kind of question further showed that he was slightly arrogant. Yunheng was stunned. Then, his mouth twitched slightly. If he had not restrained himself, he would have already laughed out loud. My master will run away? He has never done that in his life. This kind of thinking is too ridiculous. Yunheng answered, a little disdainful. Chu Feng nodded. He felt that this was good. He was relieved. Yunheng felt very uncomfortable. What did this strange young man mean? It was really baffling. After hearing this, he actually looked very satisfied. Then, he did not want to stay here anymore. He felt that he had already done his duty as a host. Even if it was an old friend of his master, he had given enough respect. Moreover, whether it was an old friend or not was still up for discussion. Fellow Taoist, please sit down. My master is about to return. I need to make some arrangements, Yunheng said. He left with that elder. However, he also arranged for a disciple to wait on him. Chu Feng said, It's all right. Dear nephew, you go and do what you need to do. I will walk around casually and look at the various sites in Brother Tai Wu's Dao field. There is no need to mind me. This was not polite. He really wanted to walk around. He wanted to make some arrangements before Tai Wu returned. He wanted to seal this ancient Dao field so that the enemy would not be able to escape even if they had wings. Yunheng and the others exchanged pleasantries before turning to leave. Chu Feng flew down from the Golden Palace and landed in this Taoist field that was rich in essence qi. His eyes revealed wisps of talisman patterns as he activated his fiery golden eyes to observe the mountain guarding field. From the scripture pavilion to the rare medicinal fields, he carefully inspected everything. He didn't even overlook the most remote corners, so he had a good idea of what was going on. Who was he? The most talented domain researcher had already taken one step into the heavenly master domain. It could be said that his skills were world-shaking. From the past until now, Chu Feng's most astonishing talent wasn't cultivation but rather his research on domains. It surpassed evolution. After he embarked on the path of cultivation, his evolutionary abilities could be said to be extraordinary and could be considered rare in the world. However, his talent in the field of domains was even more outstanding and even surpassed them. Now, a heavenly adept-level entity like him had walked into this place as if he was walking on flat ground. All the domains were ineffective against him. The so-called field heavenly masters were on the same level as the celestial venerables. However, in reality, they were more respected and more powerful than the latter. That was because they were too rare. To cross over to this level by taking the path of domains was many times more difficult than simple evolution. It was unimaginable. Heavenly masters fiddled with mountains and rivers and moved celestial energy. They could turn a pure land into a land of death and turn famous mountains and great rivers into a level road. They were greatly respected by all the major powers. Taiwu had power, status, and connections. However, back then, he paid so much attention to the Little Yin realm and went to search for the ultimate lost treasure in the Yang realm. Even so, he only sent out divine masters in the field of domains. As for his own Tao field, he had spent countless resources to invite a certain field heavenly master to help him set it up. However, he couldn't repair it year after year. Chu Feng nodded. The domains here weren't bad, but how could they stump him? He secretly made a move and changed all the underground talisman patterns to form a trapping terrain. Anyone who participated in this distinguished meeting would find it difficult to escape. This would prevent someone from escaping and reporting when he attacked Taiwu. He wanted to suppress the entire sect and all the guests by himself. Before long, this Grand Tao Field's terrain underwent a subtle change. Those who weren't field heavenly masters couldn't sense it, and no one could sense it. Everything was ready and only the last step was left. As long as Chu Feng took a step forward and imprinted the final critical domain, everything here would change and turn into a big urn. And he was still waiting. He had to wait for the big turtle, Taiwu, to return and set foot on the mountain gate before he could make his move. High up in the clouds, the long and drawn-out sound of a large bell shook this part of the world. More news had arrived, and the Tao Field's transportation domain had prepared sufficient divine magnets. This meant that Taiwu's return wasn't far away. Tao friend, let's go together and welcome Brother Taiwu's return. Some people walked out from the group of golden palaces floating in the air and called out to their friends. They called out to the honored guests in the various VIP lounges and called them to welcome Taiwu together. This was really a bit too much. As a guest, how could they turn around and welcome the master of this place? However, a group of people walked out and really moved out. Moreover, they were quite enthusiastic and headed toward the only large-scale transportation domain platform in this Tao field. Under their lead, the younger generation, the disciples of various sects, and some geniuses and noble ladies also rushed over to welcome Taiwu's return. Chu Feng curled his lips and revealed a cold smile. It was true that if one was powerful, everyone in the world would be his friend, but if one was petty, everyone in the neighborhood would be his enemy. The Taiwu lineage was sufficiently powerful. Moreover, with the resurrection of the world-shaking martial madman, this lineage's status could be said to be even more illustrious. There were guests everywhere and heroes from all walks of life revolving around them. This kind of commotion couldn't be more normal for some people. Very soon, someone discovered Chufeng. Seeing him, strolling on the ground with nothing to do, they immediately felt somewhat dissatisfied and called out to him. "Dao friend, I noticed that you've also rested in the Golden Palace area. You're indeed an honored guest. Now that Brother Taiwu has returned, why don't you come and welcome him?" It was a gray-haired middle-aged man, but it was difficult to say exactly how old he was. His strength was extraordinary and could be considered outstanding among the guests. He had stepped into the domain of a celestial venerable. Chufeng said indifferently, "I've known Brother Taiwu for a long time, and we can be considered close friends. There's no need to be polite with him. He knows my heart and I understand his intentions. He has never asked me to send him off." That person was astonished and looked somewhat embarrassed. He had surrounded and flattered Taiwu, but in the end, he had met Taiwu's close friend. His performance this time was really not good. "Is that so? We haven't seen each other for so many years. It's not bad to welcome an old friend." He found a way out of this embarrassing situation. In truth, it was also him who had called for people to welcome Taiwu's return. That was because he wanted to find the martial madman's lineage as a great backer in the future. The world was going to be chaotic. Currently, many sects and orthodoxies were making choices. There were many evolvers like him. At this time, another person spoke. It was a golden-haired, middle-aged man. He was also one of the few celestial venerables. He said, "Ah, Brother Taiwu's close friend? This Dao friend's tone is a little arrogant. I've known Brother Taiwu for many years, but I've never heard of him having a friend of the same generation as him in the Divine King domain. The path of cultivation we've experienced has crushed time and washed away the dregs. There aren't many so-called old friends from the same generation." This person seemed to be very familiar with Taiwu. His voice was ear-piercing and slightly mocking. He stared at Chufeng with an unfriendly expression. This was also one of the 2 or 3 people that Chufeng had his eyes on. If he wanted to kill Taiwu, he naturally had to consider the celestial venerables who were closest to him. With his hands behind his back, Chufeng soared into the sky and arrived in front of them. He said, "Since this Dao friend has said so, then I'll personally welcome Taiwu. I want to see if he has anything to say to me and if he feels that I'm being too polite. I feel that he should apologize on my behalf." When they heard his words, everyone was moved. They were all shocked. Who exactly was this person? He actually had this kind of qualification. If he were to welcome Taiwu, would it make the great martial heavenly venerate feel guilty? I'll wait for Brother Taiwu to come out. Chufeng stood outside the large-scale domain and waited quietly. Everyone's attention was on him. Many people were looking forward to seeing if the great martial heavenly venerate would really treat him with respect and feel guilty once he appeared. In fact, Chufeng was standing here to wait for the great martial heavenly venerate to appear. He would immediately give him a big slap in the face in front of everyone. At that time, everyone would be dumbfounded. They would be completely dumbfounded. Chapter 14:23. Hiss! Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. This person was so arrogant. Could it be that he really had a great background? But in any case, he was only at the Divine King realm. In the eyes of that golden-haired heavenly venerable, he couldn't stir up any waves and wasn't a big deal. Very well then. I'll wait for Brother Taiwu to return. I want to see how he treats you and how he apologizes to you. The golden-haired heavenly venerable laughed, but his snow-white teeth were somewhat terrifying. We're all Brother Taiwu's guests. Let's not have any misunderstandings between us. The gray-haired heavenly venerable who had first called for everyone to welcome Taiwu mediated. He shot a glance at Chufeng, and there was no goodwill in the depths of his eyes. Chufeng had his hands behind his back. He didn't say anything and maintained a calm and natural posture. He was observing this super-transmission domain. In a while, when Taiwu returned, he would naturally cut it off. But soon, he was attracted by another object. It was a bronze tablet buried in front of the transmission domain. Its surface was engraved with strange tadpole characters that contained traces of Tao aura. Boundary tablet? Chu Feng was surprised. This was a bronze tablet buried to prevent the transmission domain from collapsing. Only those with great abilities could refine this tablet. Oh, this is the work of my Grandmaster to ensure the stability of space. He bestowed it to my master back then. If everyone can comprehend a thing or two, it will be greatly beneficial to you. At this time, a quasi-heavenly venerable spoke. This was the eldest disciple of Taiwu, Qing Chuan. The super-transmission domain naturally involved the domain of space. It could transfer a person from one place to millions of miles away and open up a spatial path. If an accident happened during this process, it would inevitably be a tragedy. Therefore, those superpowers with a particular background would have some protective measures. This bronze boundary tablet was such an object that contained a certain amount of spatial laws. After everyone heard this, they were all shocked. Wasn't Qing Chuan's Grandmaster the youngest and most beloved disciple of the martial madman? That person's work was naturally no small matter. It was worthy of everyone's attention. The bronze tablet must contain marvelous truths. Many people were stirred up, silently comprehending. Even the Empyreans were no exception, silently speculating. The marvelous laws of the martial madman's lineage are also the Tao fruits of heaven and earth. Although I'm his enemy, I shouldn't ignore it and should study it here. Chu Feng secretly observed. However, he was still slightly repulsed. After all, the two of them were about to engage in a life-and-death battle, and he did not have a good impression of his opponent's so-called ingenious reasoning. On the boundary monument, tadpole characters swam about. Spatial laws were faintly discernible, and it was as if there was lightning streaking past. Primal chaos aura swirled about, and it was truly majestic and intimidating. However, Chu Feng had just come out of the Great Forbidden Area not long ago, and he'd witnessed the woman in white pierce through the heavens with his own 2 eyes. So how could he be intimidated by the bronze tablet before him? Unknowingly, his mind was filled with the figure of the white-clothed woman, comprehending everything about her. Among them, the one that left the deepest impression on Chu Feng was that in the end, he had discovered that the woman was merely a corpse and not the real body. Can I try this kind of rebirth? No one noticed that there was someone here who was absent-minded. He was actually thinking about another person and path when he was looking at the famous boundary monument. This was Chu Feng's current state. When one's heart leaned towards one side, even one's comprehension of the path would be biased and make a choice. This choice caused the boundary monument to become a kind of indescribable pressure that began to target him. It glistened brilliantly, and the aura of the great Tao continuously crushed towards Chu Feng. He immediately felt as heavy as a mountain, but he was still fearless. It was merely an inanimate object, so how could it make the sky collapse? He was still trying to figure out the changes in the various Tao fruits of the white-clothed woman. But even if he yearned for it in his heart, it was impossible for him to comprehend the supreme wondrous method of shedding another immortal fetus in a short period of time. It was truly too profound. However, Chu Feng's heart was also moved, and he touched the potential of his soul light. He actually had a flash of inspiration at this bizarre moment, and he had an indescribable harvest. This was the result of his many years of accumulation and the advancement of his cultivation. Right now, it was nothing more than the reflection of the environment, mental state, and other factors working together. What he thought in that instant became a flash of insight. He obtained a technique. When he opened his mouth and exhaled, all of his essence energy was about to gush out. This was the development of his cultivation and technique. Chu Feng understood in that instant. If he exhaled this breath of air, a mouthful of innate great Tao essence would condense and take human form. It would attack in his place with all his strength. However, He suppressed it and wasn't willing to show his divinity in front of others. Instead, he lightly exhaled a breath of air that was mixed with a bit of spiritual energy. As a result, a lump of clear air rushed out from his mouth and nose, turning into an indistinct humanoid creature. It rushed forward to suppress everything. This Tao friend actually comprehended the Tao and obtained great benefits here. However, it seems to be at odds with the boundary monument. The reasoning contained within is completely different. It really is strange. He was suppressed by the boundary monument, so he clearly wasn't comprehending the technique here, but he still succeeded. A few people were endlessly bewildered. Even the golden-haired heavenly deity was astonished and a bit speechless. Wonderful, using the extreme martial lineage's laws to temper oneself. Haha, how interesting. The so-called boundary monument is nothing more than this. It's just a whetstone. Another person laughed heartily. This was clearly stirring up trouble. Not only was this ridiculing the extreme martial lineage, but it was also dragging Chu Feng into the storm. Most of the people who came here naturally came to participate in the distinguished meeting because of the martial madman's lineage. They wanted to get close to him, but there were naturally people who were hostile, including the extreme martial heavenly deity. That enemy's sect also had a shocking background. Even if the martial madman came into being, he might not be able to suppress them. Of course, that enemy of the extreme martial lineage didn't come today. Only some experts who were on good terms with him had appeared. The extreme martial lineage's people were naturally displeased. They didn't like this person. As for Chu Feng, he wasn't affected at all. He simply didn't take it to heart. He didn't need this person to stir things up. He would also become enemies with the extreme martial lineage and suppress and kill them. At this time, Chu Feng responded with a smile because he felt that he might be able to cooperate with this person in the future. I've gained something and need to go to a quiet place to comprehend it. I'll take my leave for now, said Chu Feng. He turned around and left, appearing in a mountain range of the extreme martial dojo. Everyone was speechless. Was this person's harvest so great? He actually needed to go into seclusion immediately. It was just a boundary monument. It had been placed here for who knew how many years, but no one had been able to comprehend it. Of course, what made many people of the extreme martial lineage even more indignant was that this person didn't directly comprehend the monument. Instead, he used it to temper himself and finally obtained some kind of Tao fruit. Chu Feng transformed many times in the depths of the mountain range. In the end, a human figure that was no different from him came out from his mouth and nose. It pounced forward to kill. It was truly a terrifying attack. This kind of attack could be considered a kind of killing method. It could instantly condense all the essence qi in his body and launch an all-out attack. The most important thing was that after such an attack, all the essence qi could return to its original position in an instant. It was just a moment of gathering and dispersing, and it wouldn't exhaust him. This was very useful. If he continued to develop it, it could become a trump card. The so-called instant enlightenment and instant enlightenment meant that he didn't need much time to gain something. Not long after, he had more or less comprehended it and left this state. In a moment Chu Feng came back again. This made some people silent and speechless. The golden-haired celestial venerable and the gray-haired celestial venerable felt that it was really preposterous. This person actually comprehended the Tao and consolidated his Tao fruit so quickly? Buzz. The boundary monument shone, and at the same time, the super-teleportation domain rumbled. There was a powerful domain energy that spread out. The divine magnets here were all activated. My teacher has returned, the extreme martial dojo's eldest disciple, Qing Chuan, said. As for Yun Huang and the other disciples, they were also pleasantly surprised. They lined up and welcomed the great martial saint's return. The gray-haired celestial venerable straightened his sleeves and stood there solemnly. He came here to find the martial madman's faction as a backer. He was very serious now. He was the one who first called for the cultivators to welcome the great martial saint. Naturally, he had to perform now. The geniuses of the various sects and their deputy sect masters also came forward to welcome the great martial saint's return. They were all very serious. Everything was different after the martial madman's resurrection. The great martial saint was the elite celestial venerable of the younger generation. He was an important orthodoxy branch that had dealings with the outside world. He needed to be valued by all parties. Waves of light flickered, and the teleportation domain undulated like golden waves. Dense energy gathered to form a door, and a human-shaped life-form walked out. Tao, brother great marshal. The gray-haired celestial venerable was full of smiles as he spoke and lowered his posture. Haha, Tao brother has returned. The golden-haired celestial venerable laughed. However, what they didn't expect was that there was someone more enthusiastic than them. Chu Feng moved and had already walked forward with large strides. This also exceeded everyone's expectations. Even the great martial saint's personal disciples were surprised. Could it be that this person really had a close relationship with their master? The great martial saint stepped out of the energy door. Astral winds surged between heaven and earth. The order was like a waterfall, interweaving like lightning. All kinds of patterns appeared, and the rumbling sound was deafening. This was the appearance of the Tao's rules. The great martial saint was surprised. There was actually a youth at the exit, smiling and waiting for him to appear. This person was so young, so how could he stand at the forefront and be in front of the celestial venerables? What kind of identity did he have? The great martial saint naturally didn't understand. However, when he looked carefully, he felt that this person was a little familiar. Great Marshal, long time no see. I missed you. Chu Feng smiled and took a step forward. After everyone heard this, they were immediately shocked. This person really had a close relationship with the great martial saint's old friend? He wasn't lying. Tao friend. The great martial saint opened his mouth to speak to Chu Feng. In the end, before he could finish speaking, he felt that something was wrong. A slap suddenly appeared in front of him, smashing down on his face. But this crisp sound shocked the entire Tao Plaza. It also shook this part of the world, and it shocked everyone. For a moment, everyone was stunned. It was simply unbelievable. Someone dared to hit the great martial saint. This was too unreasonable. Who dared to do this? Who could do this? However, this kind of thing happened right in front of their eyes. The youth who was once great martial saint's old friend actually slapped great martial saint's face firmly. At this time, half of the great martial saint's face almost collapsed. It was too sudden. He was struck by a tremendous force. His face was distorted, and the bones inside were broken. Even his teeth were loosened, and a few of them fell out along with blood and saliva. How many years had it been since he had experienced such an embarrassing experience? Even when he was young and had yet to evolve, he had never suffered such humiliation. No one dared to specifically wait at the exit and slap his face like this. The great martial saint was furious. His eyes were about to turn vertical, and his pupils were terrifying. It was as if cold light shot out from hell. Energy surged all over his body, and his hair danced about chaotically. He wanted to suppress and kill Chu Feng. Hong Long Glong. Heaven and earth shook violently, and the entire world was about to disintegrate. The world was full of great Tao and order symbols. They spread out, about to tear apart the universe. However, Chu Feng reached out a hand to block. It was like a spring breeze blowing against his face, calming all of the restlessness. He raised his hand to suppress the universe, making the entire world quiet down. It's you, the ghost of the little underworld, the great martial saint angrily rebuked. He was an extraordinary existence in the end. Even though a long period of time had passed, and this person was incomparably weak at that time, he still sensed it. He clearly knew who this person was. After all, the current Chu Feng had revealed his true appearance, and his temperament had changed greatly. It was completely the aura of the past. You killed my loved ones, slaughtered my brothers, and killed my confidant. This is a great enmity, and it is absolutely irreconcilable, Chu Feng said coldly. His eyes were bloodshot as he thought of his parents, and he thought of Yao Yao and the others. Those people's vivid faces could still clearly appear before his eyes. He wanted to suppress and kill the great martial saint with all his strength. Ah, you ghost, you actually ran to the Yang realm. But what can you do? The great martial saint calmed down, and waves of light flashed in front of him. That was the marvelous law of order. It protected his body, temporarily isolating him from Chu Feng. Then, the great martial saint wore an indifferent smile and said, I killed your parents, wiped out your group of brothers, and beheaded your confidant. What can you do? It's all done by me, so what can you do? This time, I'll even kill you. You're nothing but a lonely wild ghost. I'll let you and the others reunite. Sogu. Chapter 1424. I killed your parents, slaughtered your friends, and beheaded your lovers. What can you do? What can you do? I'll kill you too. No matter who it was, they would not be able to endure such words and experience. They would never be able to live under the same sky. Even for Chu Feng, even if he had reached the rare eternal king realm, his blood was boiling with anger. His soul light soared into the sky, and his whole body swayed, causing the heaven and earth to tremble. Around his body, black spatial cracks spread, and it was about to collapse. The scars of the past were mercilessly and maliciously torn open, dripping with blood. The voices and smiles of the deceased were still in front of his eyes. Those warm and nostalgic memories seemed to have happened just yesterday. After colliding with Tai Wu's cold eyes and cruel words, it made people even more sorrowful and regretful. Chu Feng's murderous aura was boundless. At this moment, his hair stood on end, as if it was going to pierce through the sky. It carried the emotions he had when he witnessed the passing of his loved ones, friends, and beauties in the lesser netherworld. With boundless regret and loss, he was about to burst into flames. Tai Wu, I won't let you die so easily. All the karma and the calamity of 100 generations are waiting for you to bear. Chu Feng said coldly. He was really angry. He had never hated a person so much. Before coming to the world of the living, he had no other goal in this life except to kill Tai Wu with his own hand. This person was right in front of him, and his cold and malicious words provoked Chu Feng's heartstrings. Today, even if all the experts of the martial madman's faction came out to fight for him, Chu Feng would still fight with all his might. Thinking of his loved ones, his mind mourned, but Chu Feng came for the battle after all. It was almost an instant of silence, and his heart was without ripples, leaving only endless fighting spirit. At this level, the provocation of words, the interference of divine sense, etc., in the end, could not play a crucial role. Tai Wu's wantonly ridicule was not for the following battle, because he knew that the effect was minimal. At their level, they could subdue their inner demons in an instant. He just casually played with his opponent's emotions, watching him go crazy, watching him suffer, and then he smiled faintly, revealing a mocking expression. Since ancient times I have always existed in the world. After achieving Tao fruit, I have experienced countless brilliant eras. Facing the great Tao, life and death in the mortal world is just a trivial matter. You are just a weakling trapped in the mortal world, tortured by the life and death of the people around you. Are you worthy to compete with me? You overestimate yourself. Tai Wu opened his mouth again. This time, he attacked. It seemed like he was provoking his opponent again, taking the initiative to control his opponent's emotional fluctuations. This time, his every word contained the power of rules. Formless energy condensed in the dark and appeared abruptly around Chu Feng. Then, it descended in an instant. This was a lost ancient spell. It contained the power of the order. It contained the power of the power. The power contained the power. It contained the power of the power. The power of the power. The power could it. But at this moment Chu Feng was cold and detached. He could control his emotions as he pleased. His body had long since become like an ancient well without ripples. His eyes were cold to the extreme, like two icy ponds in the netherworld. At this moment, he merely clenched his fists, and the black void around him exploded. Chu Feng's body and psyche seemed to contain boundless power. With a single tremble, heaven and earth seemed to collapse, as if it couldn't contain his true form. At this moment, the golden symbols that gathered from all directions all exploded. Ferocious energy erupted, as if a million volcanoes erupted at the same time. It was as if a part of the starry sky was disintegrating. It was too resplendent, and terrifying energy wreaked havoc, suppressing the world. So. In the vicinity, several Empyreans all moved, bringing others away from this place. It was because they couldn't endure this kind of confrontation at all. If they were a step late, their disciples would all die, their bodies and soul light turning into dust. Tai Wu released a cold snort. It was as if a streak of immortal Tao lightning swept past, disturbing this space. Mist that contained natural laws swept past, restoring clarity to this world. At the same time, another wave of power soared in front of Tai Wu. That was boundless energy that rose and fell like golden waves. It blocked in front of him, isolating his opponent's corrosion. During this process, the injuries on his face healed. His broken cheekbones and flesh from the slap he received from Chu Feng earlier were reconstructed, and his teeth grew back as well. Even though his words were chilly and his expression was indifferent, looking down on Chu Feng, he wasn't so casual in his heart. Instead, he attached great importance to this opponent. He knew very well that he would not underestimate any living creature that dared to invade his Taoist field alone, no matter if it was an old enemy from an ancient orthodoxy that shook the world, or a ghost from the Little Een realm. He would treat them seriously. As soon as they exchanged blows, he knew that this lone wild ghost that he looked down on back then and regarded as a useless chicken or a stray dog had accomplished something. He was extremely remarkable. However, his expression was still cold, as if he was facing an opponent that wasn't worth fighting. His feet took strange steps. A resplendent golden lotus appeared beneath his feet and was actually about to enter the mountains and rivers. Heavenly Venerable Tai Wu was very powerful, but he had lived for so many years and was so famous. It wasn't just because he was brave but also cautious. The golden lotus beneath his feet was a talisman, an energy talisman that connected to the outside world. He wanted to send out a message to summon his fellow sect members and let them know that someone was invading his cave residence. No matter how powerful this opponent was, he had to consider the worst-case scenario. What if there were unforeseen changes, or if there were enemies in the dark? His sect wasn't weak. The martial madman's lineage was full of experts. If a few of them were to come, not to mention the seniors, even those of the same generation would be able to sweep through a part of the universe. How many people would dare to face them casually? Boom! However, the resplendent golden lotus beneath his feet had just moved and hadn't even touched the special information transmission domain hidden in the mountains and rivers when it exploded. Smoke and dust filled the sky, the earth was torn apart, and all the talismans were destroyed. If it were someone else, Tai Wu would naturally succeed easily. This was his Tao field, and he was too familiar with the layout. He controlled this world. But who was Chu Feng? He was an expert who had almost reached the heavenly master realm in the field of domains. From a certain perspective, the mountains and rivers listened to his commands, and the earth was his chessboard, allowing him to place his pieces. How could such a method be hidden from him? That was why the golden lotus immediately exploded and disappeared. Tai Wu was indifferent. He raised his hand and a large bell formed from magic power fell down and crashed toward Chu Feng. At the same time, he took a step back. In the end, he stopped in his tracks in an instant. This was because he had only made a simple attempt, and he already understood that the altar made of divine magnet stones that was specially used to transport elites had also solidified and lost its function. The enemy had cut off the connection between this place and the outside world and wanted to lock him in the Dao field. Clang! Chu Feng pointed with his hand and a dazzling beam of light flew out. It struck the large bell and directly pierced through it. The bell body turned into dozens of pieces, and the long ringing came to an abrupt end. Little Taoist, watch how I suppress and kill you. Tai Wu was calm and composed. A dazzling piece of paper appeared in the void, emitting a majestic divine might. The two celestial venerables who were on good terms with him relaxed after hearing his word. They believed that Tai Wu had measured his opponent's strength and might be about to kill him. At the same time, the two celestial venerables also felt that it was necessary to show off. The gray-haired celestial venerable was the one who had gathered everyone to welcome Tai Wu's return in order to find the martial madman's faction as a backer. Now, he revealed a faint smile and took a step forward. He looked at Chu Feng and said, "Dao friend, you're obviously a celestial venerable who came with hostility, but you hid your strength and lied to us. Unfortunately, you're too conceited. It's not wise to come here to show off." As he spoke, he secretly took out a red-skinned gourd. Scarlet light bloomed, and a black hole appeared at the mouth of the gourd. It was about to swallow Chu Feng. "Dao friend Tai Wu, let me help you. I'm enough to deal with these demons and monsters of the underworld," he said with a laugh. His gourd had gone through sufficient preparation just now. It was a peak attack that could kill a celestial venerable. Normally, no one would give him such a long time to prepare in a real fight. However, this was a good opportunity for him to show off in front of Tai Wu. Even if he lost, he was confident that he could protect himself. Everything he did now was just to get involved with the martial madman's faction. However, although the red-skinned gourd was dazzling and emitted terrifying energy waves, it exploded in an instant. Chu Feng's fist was too dazzling. His body moved like lightning, and time seemed to have frozen. In a trance, he seemed to have surpassed the restraints of time energy and directly appeared in front of the celestial venerable, shattering it. What kind of mighty power was this? It shocked everyone. The gray-haired celestial venerable also coughed up blood on the spot. His whole body was sent flying along with the broken gourd. Chi. At the same time, Chu Feng drew a line with his finger. The mountains and rivers shook. Whether it was the gray-haired celestial venerable or the golden-haired celestial venerable who was on good terms with Tai Wu, they were both thrown deep into the mountains in the distance. They were isolated from the battlefield by the domain runes. No one could interfere with his attack. These people would be dealt with by him in a while. Power of burning heaven, suppress and kill demons and monsters. Tai Wu shouted. The inexplicable piece of paper burned and fell toward Chu Feng. Chu Feng was indifferent. He didn't care at all. He moved forward and began to take the initiative to attack. He wanted to kill Tai Wu. Boom! Every movement of his hands and feet was wondrous. He grabbed the paper with both hands and directly shook it, about to tear it apart. At the same time, he opened his mouth and spat out a dazzling beam of light. It condensed into a new self. It was like a divine fetus, and it rushed toward Tai Wu on the spot. This sudden change shocked Tai Wu. The corners of the mouths of the people watching the battle in the distance twitched. This was a wonderful technique that this kid had comprehended in the Tai Wu dojo not long ago. He actually used it to deal with Tai Wu so quickly. Boom! Tai Wu attacked with all his might. There were endless runes and wonderful techniques, but he couldn't guard against this process. The divine fetus covered him and directly exploded. This was simply a great calamity. The explosion of a celestial venerable level energy was an extremely terrifying disaster. Tai Wu defended with all his might, but the arms of the divine fetus didn't disintegrate during this period. They were still intact. Fist after fist smashed toward Tai Wu's face. Especially at the last attack, one of the fists turned into a palm and once again smashed heavily onto his face. It wasn't because of the destructive power of the fist, but because of the internal humiliation. Tai Wu was simply furious. The other party had actually thought of a way to slap him in the face. I recommend a book called 9 Dragons Swallowing Pearl. It's very good. Those who are lacking in books should go read it. Introduction. A map of the elixir of immortality passed down from the first emperor's imperial palace. It unravels the secrets of immortality. Chapter 1425. How dare you! Tai Wu was enraged. The blood in his body rushed to the top of his head. His face was cold, and his hair fluttered in the wind. A majestic energy surged from his body, making the world collapse. Near him, the void was densely packed, which was compressed by a restless and overbearing aura. His body was trembling slightly. The dignified successor of the martial madman, a famous celestial venerable, was actually slapped in the face by a young man of the younger generation. What kind of humiliation was this? Moreover, this was a repeated humiliation. Earlier, he was slapped in the face. This was a humiliation that Tai Wu had never experienced in his life. Chu Feng stopped moving. He was quite calm and said in a tone that was neither fast nor slow, "In your words, so what if I hit you? So what if I slap your face? So what if I slap you in public? What can you do to me?" Earlier, Tai Wu had said that he had killed Chu Feng's parents, slaughtered his brothers, and beheaded his confidant. In the end, he had coldly ridiculed him, saying, "So what? You're just chickens and dogs." Now, he was the one being targeted. Evil creature. Tai Wu's celestial venerable's murderous intent was boundless. If he couldn't kill this young genius in front of him today, his reputation would go down the drain. The growth of this ghost from the small Een world was too fast. It was beyond his imagination, which made him feel afraid and worried. If he was allowed to grow like this, he would become a big problem in the future. Tai Wu shouted, "Creature born from the wild grave in the small Een world, I see you dare to be arrogant in the Yang world. Everyone in the world has the right to punish you. Today you have become a common enemy. The 4 celestial venerables can kill you. Die." As he spoke, he had already made his move. An old piece of paper appeared in his hand. This was a rune decree written with his blood essence when he was at the peak of his vitality. It was stamped with his own spiritual imprint, and it was said to be able to suppress all otherworldly creatures. With a bang, the decree flew out, and like a golden sky collapsing, it fell toward Chu Feng. Decrees were like the heavens. Even an Empyrean wouldn't be able to inscribe many of these talismans that were inscribed with the blood essence of one's prime. This was because it consumed far too much origin energy. These talismans were accumulated in their early years and were most suitable for dealing with Een spirit. Hee. Chu Feng sneered. Did he really think that he was a ghost? Was he looking down on him or looking down on him? Ever since he came to the world of the living, he had already made up for his shortcomings. He baptized himself with the mortal monarch's blood and obtained the eternal monarch physique. One day, when the Tao fruit of the little netherworld and the Tao fruit of the Yang realm become one, it was bound to cause a qualitative change. Who do you think you are? Do you think that you can command all the Empyreans in the Yang realm? You even want to kill me together? Chu Feng scoffed. In the face of such a world-shocking golden talisman, he raised his arm and grabbed it. It could be said that his bare hands could split the vault of heaven. The tip of his fingers revealed a black crack in the void, and the density of the energy was astonishing. Bang! Accompanied by violent tremors and intense collisions, the decree shone with dazzling golden light. The blood-colored characters on it were like blood-colored stars revolving one after another as they rushed out in unison. No matter how the decree was shattered, the profound meaning of the runes rushed up and covered Chu Feng. Platinum light flickered around Chu Feng's body. This was the humanoid monarch domain and the blood energy of King Heng. It surged intensely and crushed the runes that wrapped around him. Gotcha! The brilliant blood-colored characters were even more terrifying than the Dao swords. One moment they were incomparably sharp, and the next they were as heavy as a mountain. They rushed forward, but they were still no match for the platinum humanoid monarch domain, and were crushed. However, an unforeseen event occurred. After all the blood-colored characters scattered, they didn't completely disappear. Instead, they turned into a torrent, and then the transformation began. Heh! Tai Wu sneered. How could he not see that this person's yin qi had disappeared, and that he had long been reborn? This was just a prelude, and now, he unleashed his trump card. 9 heavens 10 earths, Earth Queen Heaven, 8 great desolate realms, summon the decree. Heed my command and kill the evil enemy. As Tai Wu spoke, the entire mountain range became different. It released a faint blood-colored color, and then it turned into a sparkling purple color. Dense mists rose and heaven and earth essence energy surged. These mountains and rivers were Tai Wu's Dao field that had been managed by him for many years. He poured endless blood and effort into it, and there were all types of heavenly materials buried under this land. There were even Dao diagrams and comprehensions that he had engraved. Now they were activated by his blood essence decree, becoming his ultimate killing technique. In that instant, the heavens collapsed and the earth split apart. Ghosts wept and gods howled. Countless gods and devils rushed out from underground, all of them formed from natural laws. Chilly winds whistled. Blood-dyed gods and devils flew over one after another, all of them holding weapons. They made the mountains and rivers rumble, as if the world was going to explode. They were extremely domineering, and every single creature carried heaven overflowing might. Honglong. The mountains and rivers split apart. Even though this was the Dao field of an Empyrean and there was a domain restricting it, it still couldn't withstand this kind of impact. Some gods and devils opened their mouths and sucked in, causing the sky to darken and all essence energy to be sucked dry. There were also gods and devils that roared, causing the void to collapse and the power of dimensional space to be drawn out. This was simply a scene of doomsday. Gods and devils appeared together, throwing the world into chaos. Chu Feng's pupils shrank. He sighed inwardly. This famous Empyrean was indeed extraordinary. His methods were quite amazing, and he actually had this kind of momentum. This was the derivation of all kinds of natural laws. It could almost be considered a personification. If this continued, it could be considered to have reached the stage of splitting open the earth, creating life from the earth and extracting the essence of natural laws. Chu Feng's expression was cold. He pointed out with his hand and softly shouted, "Lock!" This simple word contained the true meaning of the great Tao. Honglong. Within the collapsed mountains and rivers, the gods and devils that were rushing out froze for a short period of time, as if their source of energy had been cut off. Tai Wu's expression changed. A fist-sized brass seal appeared in his hand, and he shook it forcefully toward the mountains and rivers. He once again issued an order and released the divine might of heaven and earth. Chu Feng didn't hesitate. He took a step forward and a large number of runes emerged. Those were domain patterns appearing and interweaving with the entire earth. He could be considered a heaven-bestowed existence among domain researchers. This kind of deadly zone was something he could break. If it were anyone else, they might have already stepped into a land of death. After all, this Dao field was the accumulation of an old Empyrean over countless years. It hid a great killing technique that was difficult for external enemies to break. This was also the reason why it was difficult for Empyreans to die. They had a Dao field that was compatible with them, and they were almost one with the earth. They were the most difficult to deal with. Once the enemy stepped into a Empyrean's Dao field, it was equivalent to stepping into a chess game of life and death. They would be quite passive and would lose the initiative. Ordinary Empyreans simply wouldn't dare to invade like this. However, Chu Feng was an expert in domains. He was completely fearless as he stood on the ground of the mountain range. Pull the mountains and rivers, fiddle with the sun, moon, and stars. Interweave horizontally and vertically, draw in a mouthful of heaven-opening essence. Suppress it. Following Chu Feng's shout, the entire mountain range obeyed his command. Many demons that had rushed out from the ground were locked up, and some of them were actually disintegrating and exploding. "You!" Tai Wu drew in a breath of cold air. He was truly shocked. He had already determined that this little adversary wasn't simple and should be proficient in some domain techniques to prevent him from transmitting information to the outside world. But now that he had experienced it personally, he felt his body go cold. Was this really the Heavenly Master's method? He found it hard to believe. How old was this person before him? He was merely a youth. Even if the time he had spent cultivating in the lesser Yin realm was added, he was still too young. He had actually cultivated to this level. The study of domains was several times or even 10 times more difficult than evolution, but this person had managed to reach this level in such a short period of time. "Let the underworld treasure come into being," Tai Wu shouted in a low voice. Many of his methods had been broken. This Tao field was originally a trump card that was compatible with him. It was enough to kill all kinds of outsiders, and even Empyreans would die if they charged in. But now, he couldn't do anything to this youth. He had used yet another trump card. Underworld treasures were fragments of treasures dug out from the ground. It was unknown which era they belonged to, but they all possessed great power. Now, the so-called underworld treasure had appeared. He wasn't asking it to come out and display its might, but rather directly activating it to burn it. He would gather the remnant ancient energy within to deal with the great enemy. At this moment, a terrifying omen appeared. There were actually some faint true immortal shadows, faintly discernible. Waves of immortal music reverberated through the world. The source was from underground. Several underworld treasures were burning and releasing an indescribable power. This was Tai Wu activating an ancient magical artifact. He sacrificed his blood to burn it, causing its laws to reappear. Numerous wondrous principles interweaved and formed a combined force within the mountains and rivers to kill together. "I really can't be careless," Chu Feng muttered to himself. He had never looked down on this enemy, but now he felt that he had underestimated him. Tai Wu had actually used all kinds of external objects to turn this place into a land of death. "Go!" Chu Feng let out a light shout. A bright brilliance flashed on his wrist and a bracelet flew out, crashing into the ground with a bang. That was the diamond chakram he had started to refine since he was in the lesser Yin realm. Light flickered. He had condensed several types of mother gold, but the pure white original mother gold was the main one. The other mother gold and others became decorative patterns that possessed immeasurable might. Now it could be called a 33-layered heavens artifact. Rumble! From underground, a shocking sound rang out. That was the collision of an ancient magical artifact and the newly advanced diamond chakram. It was truly astonishing. The so-called true immortal shadows and others all originated from those underworld treasures. Now, Chu Feng was directly attacking the source, wanting to cut off their energy route. Naturally, it triggered a huge shockwave. Regardless of whether it was underground or above ground, all kinds of energy mushroom clouds rose continuously. It was too terrifying, shocking all the spectators at the horizon. Even those heavenly venerables were horrified and shocked. "Master should be fine, right? He can suppress and kill powerful enemies." The expressions of the Tai Wu disciples were ugly. They never thought that this youth would actually be a great enemy that had intruded. "Go and invite the patriarch," someone said in a low voice. However, after several attempts, they had no choice but to give up. They simply couldn't leave this Tao field. They were locked by an ineffable domain and isolated from the outside world. After the last resplendent golden mushroom cloud rose, most of the Tai Wu Dao field collapsed. Those domains weren't able to lock down all the mountains and rivers. Of course, the outermost blockade still hadn't been broken. The battle had only affected the central area. In addition, the spirit medicine fields were also unharmed. This was the result of Chu Feng's special care. Tai Wu's expression was gloomy as he said, "I really didn't expect a little ghost from back then to have grown to this stage. It seems that relying on external weapons like the mountains and rivers won't be able to kill you. I have no choice but to personally take action." Even though the situation was unfavorable, he didn't panic at all. He was still very calm. He knew that he had encountered a vicious enemy and had to fight with his life on the line. He had been using his many years of accumulation in the Dao field for such a long time. He didn't directly attack because he was apprehensive, but now he had no other choice. "Kill," Tai Wu said mercilessly. His entire person disappeared from the world. Gray mist fluttered, and the world was filled with a somber atmosphere. A terrifying killing intent filled every inch of space. Suddenly, in the darkness, in the mist, a pair of terrifying eyes opened. It was Tai Wu. He swooped down at an unbelievable speed with a snow-white long blade in his hand. He slashed directly at Chu Feng with great force. It was a decisive move. Chu Feng didn't hesitate and blasted out a punch. His feet were still standing in the same place. This punch contained many years of comprehension, including the Vairocana fist, the lightning fist, and various other profound mysteries. After being activated by the robbery induction breathing technique, it was as brilliant as the sun. It was boundlessly grand and illuminated the world. This punch was too powerful. It was as if the entire world was being shaken. It was just a punch, but it caused the entire world to tremble. It rose and fell along with Chu Feng's fist, and the universe was about to explode. Clang! The fist collided with the Empyrean-level snow-white long blade. A deafening sound rang out, accompanied by a terrifying rumble. Boundless runes bloomed, and cracks appeared on the blade's body. Then it broke apart. The Empyrean's blade was broken by a single punch from Chu Feng, and then it exploded. What kind of mighty power was this? To break an Empyrean's treasure with his bare hands? It was too shocking. However, Chu Feng's brows furrowed. He didn't feel any joy because he sensed danger. They were gathering from all directions, and they were heading straight for him. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the world changed colors. The universe seemed to be turned upside down, and yin and yang were in disorder. Everything in the world seemed to be withering, and the entire Dao field turned gray. All life seemed to be on the verge of extinction. 7 celestial venerables appeared from all directions. They joined forces to besiege Chu Feng and attack him together. Everyone was shaken, all sides shaken. They couldn't help but cry out in alarm, involuntarily crying out. This was a heaven-defying ultimate art. A single person could create 7 Empyreans. What kind of mighty power was this? The extreme martial lineage was even more excited. They shouted together that their master was invincible. Who could compete with him? All the disciples of the extreme martial lineage were clamoring in excitement. This was their lineage's ultimate art. It was rumored that once it was revealed, it would be invincible. The ghost from the lesser underworld is dead for sure. Haha, I didn't think that master had already cultivated this ultimate art. Let's see if that ghost still dares to be so insolent. We'll kill it easily. Many people were laughing. Their previous worries had all disappeared. Chu Feng was moved. Even though he was already mentally prepared, he was still somewhat surprised to see this terrifying secret art again. It could indeed be called a heaven-defying ultimate art. The 7 death form was a supreme art created by the martial madman. It experienced 7 stages of death and deduced the ultimate meaning. It was difficult to find an opponent in the world. Especially when the seven death form had reached a certain level of maturity, it would resonate and manifest seven selves at the same time to attack the enemy. Who in the world could resist? However, Chu Feng was mentally prepared. Back then, he had experienced a life and death situation like this in the tripartite battlefield. He had encountered Li Chentian, the descendant of the martial madman. At that time, this person had created 7 great saints and attacked him at the same time. In the end, Chu Feng broke through it with great difficulty. Boom! Chu Feng didn't hesitate. He used the profound meaning of the golden runes he obtained from the stone jar and spread them on his hands. He put his hands together and wanted to evolve into 2 millstones. Back then, the millstone on the path of reincarnation had also manifested a portion of these golden runes. It could be said to have a great origin. At the last moment, Chu Feng didn't attack with his hands. Instead, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of innate essence qi. It turned into another him and formed a temporary double body with his own flesh and blood. Golden runes appeared on the 2 bodies. The 2 intertwined like 2 dragons. Then, they turned into a human-shaped millstone and attacked together. Boom! The first extreme martial heavenly venerable body that rushed over with a silver spear was killed by the 2 human-shaped millstones. It was too simple and straightforward. Not good! Tai Wu cried out. The 7 death form, a supreme art, actually suffered a defeat as soon as it was used. An ominous feeling arose in his heart. He vaguely felt that he was in danger today. I don't want to die. I want to live for another era. But how can I resolve this today? He trembled. Kacha! The human-shaped millstone rotated and his second heavenly venerable body was broken. No, if I can live, I can even live for another 500 years. Tai Wu's heart was hazy. The opponent's method made him feel as if doomsday was approaching. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.